Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jeffrey Hazelwood. Natalie Henderson, Carter Davis, and Jeffrey Hazelwood are three residents of Roswell. Natalie and Carter are friendly, intelligent, and optimistic. Natalie is actively involved in school activities, often representing the school at social events, while Carter balances academics and sports. Jeffrey, on the other hand, struggles with his studies, with his grades and academic performance significantly lower than his peers. As a teenager, Jeffrey was sent to a military-style school, and after graduating, he remained unemployed for several years. He later found a job in government, which allowed him to support himself. Jeffrey had a challenging childhood. He was born on July 10, 1996, into difficult circumstances. His mother, Sherry, was only 19 years old when he was born, and Sherry's partner abandoned her before Jeffrey was born. During her pregnancy, Sherry struggled with drug use. Those around her realized that she was incapable of caring for a child. As a result, when Jeffrey was 6 months old, he moved in with his grandparents. Although Jeffrey's grandparents loved him, his troubled relationship with his mother leading to him being labeled a difficult child. Throughout his teenage years, there were many incidents reported in Jeffrey's family. Jeffrey frequently engaged in dangerous activities. On one occasion, he wrote a note saying he was going to spend a few days in the wilderness testing his survival skills. In another disturbing incident, he took his grandfather's gun, prompting neighbors to call the police. His actions increasingly worried his grandparents, who attempted to hide the weapons. Despite their efforts, Jeffrey, who was smart and determined, successfully broke into a safe and took the knives and swords he loved. By 2013, when Jeffrey turned 16, his grandmother felt the need to report his troubling behavior to the police, likely out of concern for her safety and that of others. Just weeks earlier, he had warned her that his patience would eventually wear thin, and he might hurt someone, although he didn't specify who or when. As a result, Jeffrey was sent to a military school. After returning, he entered a relationship that he cherished deeply. His social media accounts were filled with expressions of love for his girlfriend, mixed with images of wolves, dark quotes, and posts about anger and mortality. No one seemed to notice or help Jeffrey. Eventually, the city of Roswell had a serious problem. On August 1, 2016, a Monday morning, a driver was making a delivery at the local grocery store. At 6 a.m., just as he approached the store, his peaceful morning turned into a nightmare. As he turned the corner toward the delivery area, he was shocked to see two bodies lying side by side in a parking lot, both dead and covered in blood. Panicked, he called the police to report what he had seen. Police quickly arrived at the scene and discovered the bodies of two young people. A man and a woman, both dead. Police spotted two cars parked nearby, and when they ran the license plates, they discovered they belonged to Carter Davis and Natalie Henderson. The young couple came from middle-class families, and neither had a criminal record or any violations. The investigation began with a search of the vehicle and a review of surveillance camera footage from the supermarket. The video showed Carter and Natalie driving through the parking lot at approximately 3 a.m. before disappearing behind the building. Additionally, just minutes before they arrived, a silver Honda had parked in front of the store. After Carter and Natalie passed the Honda, a tall man with long, unkempt hair got out of the Honda and followed them on foot, but then disappeared from view of the surveillance camera. His facial features were unclear, and the video did not capture his license plate number. All police could determine was that the car was silver, a 1990 or 1998 model, and had mismatched wheels. Police contacted the Bureau of Investigation for assistance in finding a suspect. The task was difficult because they needed to compile a list of all Honda owners in the city. After sifting through the data, they narrowed the list down to about 650 vehicles and their owners. This process of elimination was long and difficult, requiring patience and effort on the part of the police. However, their persistence paid off. On August 3, 2016, just 2 days after the discovery of Carter and Natalie's bodies, police located a driver's license that belonged to a Honda owner. This owner, Jeffrey Hazelwood, 20, lived in Roswell and was known to police because of his long black hair. His grandparents were shocked when some police officers knocked on their front door. Their surprise quickly turned to concern when the officers asked about their grandson Jeffrey. They informed the police that they did not know where he was. Jeffrey's grandparents said that they had kicked him out of the house 2 days ago. The police then investigated and found that Jeffrey was staying at his girlfriend's house. They knew the address and set up a perimeter around the house. After finding the boy's car parked in the driveway, the police waited nearby, patiently waiting for Jeffrey to show up. Hours later, Jeffrey finally came out of the house, got into his car and drove away. Undercover police observed Jeffrey as he arrived at a gas station, walked around, and changed his clothes. At that point, officers surrounded him and arrested him on suspicion of the murders of Natalie Henderson and Carter Davis before he could react. Initially, Jeffrey denied killing anyone, but after being held for several days, he was questioned by Officer Jennifer Bennett, who was assigned to Jeffrey's case. During this interrogation, several strange details came to light. When arrested, Jeffrey insisted that he was an innocent bystander and that he had not killed anyone. However, during questioning, he claimed that another man had pressured him into committing the crime. As the interrogation continued, he stopped mentioning his accomplice. Additionally, Jeffrey claimed that a voice in his head had told him to kill Natalie and Carter. Despite Jeffrey's numerous lies and confusing statements, Police Officer Bennett was able to piece together what happened on the night of August 1st. Jeffrey said his troubles began when his grandparents kicked him out of the house. To clear his head, he went to a local Waffle House, but since he had nowhere to stay for the night, he decided to park at the local grocery store. He arrived around 3 a.m. and sat in his car. While he was sitting there, 2 cars pulled into the parking lot, drove past him, circled the building. Feeling bored and lonely, Jeffrey decided to follow them on foot. After the 2 cars parked side by side, Carter Davis got out of the car and got into the back seat of Natalie's car. Natalie then joined him in the back seat, saying they wanted some private time together. Unbeknownst to them, Jeffrey was hiding behind the nearby electrical panel, observing their interaction. However, Jeffrey climbed up a nearby service ladder to get a better view from the roof of the car. Jeffrey later claimed that he did not watch for long. Sadly, Jeffrey obtained his grandfather's gun after breaking into a safe just before being kicked out of his house. What he did next was horrific. He climbed down from the roof, approached Natalie's car, and demanded that Carter exit the vehicle. He struck Carter with the gun. In that moment of panic, Jeffrey realized Carter was taller and stronger, putting him at a disadvantage in a physical struggle. In a shocking act, he raised the gun and shot Carter in the head at close range, then ordered Natalie to get out of the car. Without detailing what he did to her, Jeffrey later shot Natalie in the back of the head after she turned away. After both victims were dead, he ransacked Natalie's car, took her wallet, and drove away. However, Jeffrey's criminal activities did not stop there. That night, he was found at a gas station using Natalie's credit card to fill up his car. Surveillance cameras even recorded Jeffrey wearing a mask to hide his identity. During questioning, he stated that despite having the mask and gun, he did not take any further action. Jeffrey stated that he needed the mask to hide his identity from the person who ordered him to kill Natalie and Carter. After stopping at the gas station, he returned to the bodies. He placed the bodies on the asphalt as they had been found that morning. He then called his girlfriend and asked if he could stay with her until he could sort out his family issues. She had no idea that he had just killed someone, and she welcomed him into her home. Eventually, the police tracked him down and arrested him. During the trial, his behavior was highly erratic. He talked to himself, claimed to hear voices, and even spoke with a British accent, at one point sat shaking, made erratic head movements, and talked to himself. He was also observed conversing with an imaginary dog and pretending to hit it on the head. At a later hearing, Officer Bennett shared Jeffrey's confession, revealing the disturbing details he described about that night. He said he pulled Natalie out of the car, forced her onto the hood, and then shot her in the head. The defense argued that Jeffrey exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, Asperger's syndrome, and dissociative identity disorder. While each of these conditions can be controlled individually, the combination of all four conditions makes him an extremely unstable person. However, none of these conditions had been formally diagnosed. As such, he was deemed competent to stand trial and, with appropriate treatment, could become stable enough to understand the proceedings. Given the overwhelming amount of evidence, including forensic material from surveillance camera footage and seized items, the proof against him was strong. The prosecution quickly built a strong case against Jeffrey. The initial trial was scheduled for September 9, 2016, but it was postponed multiple times because he needed treatment. He was moved to a secure psychiatric hospital to continue his care until a new trial date was established. A hearing was conducted to evaluate Jeffrey's competence, particularly his ability to understand the legal proceedings. While he occasionally rocked in his chair, psychologists could not pinpoint his specific mental disorders. However, they diagnosed him with psychosis, which is a disorder that causes a disconnection from reality rather than a mental illness itself. Finally, on May 17, 2017, Jeffrey appeared in court as he was nearing recovery. He was not allowed to speak during treatment, so his attorney spoke on his behalf. The judge offered him a plea deal regarding the murders of Carter and Natalie, which Jeffrey accepted. He was then sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring that Jeffrey would spend the rest of his life in prison or a mental hospital. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier J.B. After her parents divorced in 1984, J.B. moved to Dothan with her mother. Her mother later married Joey Begun, who became J.B.'s loving stepfather, and she and her 4 sisters grew up in a house in Dothan. She was an outgoing girl who enjoyed a variety of activities, including cheerleading, dance lessons, playing the piano, and swimming. J.B. and her sisters also modeled for several companies. During high school, she met Tracy Hallett, with whom she quickly formed a close friendship. Tracy was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett, a police officer with the Dothan Police Department. Her life took a dramatic turn when her father died when Tracy was 5 years old. Her mother then married Mike Roberts, who raised Tracy with her mother. Unlike her friend J.B., Tracy was shy but always put others before herself. As the eldest in the family, she took her responsibilities very seriously, especially when it came to her 2 younger brothers. Tracy attended Northview High School, excelling in her studies and participating in extracurricular activities as a cheerleader, often with J.B. As the 2 girls began to enter adulthood, they had no idea of the tragic fate that awaited them. On July 31, 1999, J.B. and Tracy set off from Dothan in J.B.'s 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party in Headland, a town just a few miles north. However, unfamiliar with the roads, the 2 young women soon found themselves in trouble. Just minutes after starting their journey from home, they became lost. At approximately 10:30 p.m., J.B. and Tracy stopped at a BP gas station in Headland to ask for directions. The gas station was located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431. Using the pay phone at the gas station, they called their friends to get a better idea of how to get to the party. However, after driving on, JB and Tracy found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, instead of their intended destination. Still confused about the directions, the girls stopped at the Big Little store at 11:30 p.m. Although the store was closed, they used the pay phone to make another call. This time, Tracy called her mother to tell them they were lost in Ozark and planning to return home. A woman, Marilyn Merritt, and her daughters then stopped at a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy and JB approached them and asked for directions to Dothan. Marilyn explained the route as best she could, and the girls seemed to understand. She found the girls polite and well-mannered and noted that their car was clean. Marilyn recalled that the girls left the parking lot and turned right, as she had instructed. However, at that time, JB and Tracy had not returned home. The next morning, August 1, 1999, around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Police soon discovered their first clue regarding the girl's disappearance. After Tracy was reported missing, police found JB's car on Herring Avenue in Ozark. What was unusual about the discovery was that the car's gas tank, which had been full the day before, was now nearly empty. The car showed signs of having been driven in muddy conditions, but the doors had been locked, although the driver's side window was partially rolled down. There was no evidence of forced entry. Inside, police found JB's driver's license on the dashboard, as well as the girls' wallets, which still contained cash. However, the car keys were missing, and neither Tracy nor JB were found. A fingerprint on the locked trunk lid led police to believe something was seriously wrong. As they surveyed the scene, they suspected the trunk might contain vital clues but were hampered by the lack of a key. However, after 6 hours of investigation, they found an interior latch that allowed them to open the trunk without a key. When police opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of 2 girls inside. Both victims were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head. An autopsy revealed that Tracy had been shot in the temple, while JB had been shot in the right cheek. Tracy's body also showed a 9mm shell casing in her leg, scratches on her arm, and spikes stuck in her jeans. JB's clothes, especially her new shoes, were muddy and dirty. Police discovered that the 2 girls had likely been shot inside the trunk, although initial signs suggested an execution-style killing. After notifying their families of the discovery, an official murder investigation was launched. Police found the girls' wallets, jewelry, money, and credit cards still in the car, indicating that this was not a robbery. Autopsies revealed no alcohol or drugs in the victims' systems. Additionally, the autopsies confirmed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before her death, ruling out a sexual motive. 2 months after Tracy and JB's murders, the State Crime Lab released a report revealing the presence of unidentified semen on JB's clothing and skin. Despite this new evidence, the fingerprints found on the trunk lid remained a mystery, as there was no match in the database. With no clear leads, the investigation stalled. As news of the girls' deaths spread rapidly, police still had few leads to identify a suspect. A reward was also offered to try to gather information related to the murders, but no new leads were discovered. However, police soon received an unexpected breakthrough in the case. A month after the discovery of JB and Tracy's bodies, Johnny William Barentine, 28, a longtime resident of Ozark, came forward to the local police department on September 1st. Johnny claimed to have witnessed the girls' murders. He testified that on the night of the murders, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son around the time Tracy called from the Big Little store pay phone. At 1 a.m., Johnny returned home visibly upset and initially told his wife that he had been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. However, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny gave 6 different accounts of what he knew. He initially told Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey that he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls' bodies were discovered. Unfortunately, his story continued to change and contradict throughout the interviews. Johnny initially claimed that he picked up a tattooed stranger and drove to the Big Little store. He later said that the stranger got into a car with 2 girls, whom he recognized as the 2 girls who were later found dead. Johnny said that the group drove to Herring Avenue, where the stranger forced the girls out of the car, leading to a struggle as the girls tried to escape. According to Johnny's statement, after witnessing a confrontation, he saw something in the stranger's hand just before hearing 2 gunshots. Johnny then drove the stranger away from the scene before returning home. However, in a conflicting version of events, Johnny admitted to police that he actually knew the stranger he picked up, identifying him as a neighbor who lived nearby. Notably, Johnny's home was less than a mile from where police discovered the victims' bodies. Johnny's story was not convincing to police, and he became the prime suspect in the murders of JB and Tracy. As a result, Ozark police quickly arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of attempted murder. However, several issues with his testimony raised suspicions. Notably, Johnny did not mention any sexual activity that would explain the presence of semen on JB's clothes and body. Additionally, the neighbor he accused had a solid alibi for the time. Johnny initially confessed to making up the entire story to collect the reward money. Despite his admission, the police believed they had the right suspect. At a preliminary hearing on September 21, Alabama Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny accurately described the victim's clothing and other relevant details, indicating that he was indeed present at the crime scene. Then, at a bail hearing on October 18, Johnny gave another testimony. He proclaimed his innocence, saying that he never picked up a man with a tattoo or witnessed anything on the night of the murder. According to Johnny, he went to the store around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his son and then made up the story to get a reward. The judge denied him bail and he was sent back to the Dale County Jail in Ozark. Throughout this time, Johnny's family members remained supportive of him. They gave interviews to the media, expressing their belief in his innocence and stating that he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny's attorney, Bill Kimmons, argued that his client had no involvement in the murders of Tracy and JB, emphasizing that the 4-hour interrogation had affected Johnny, who was trapped in his own false confession. Johnny's defense also pointed out that he had only completed 7th grade and part of 8th grade. He said his client was in special education, suggesting he was incapable of planning the heinous crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that Johnny's DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. As a result, he was released from prison on December 17, 1999. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict Johnny, officially clearing him of any suspects in the murders of Tracy and JB. This development led to a setback in the investigation, with criticism directed at the police methods used and doubts raised about the Ozark Police's ability to handle the case. However, police continued to focus on other potential suspects. During the investigation, a man from Michigan was identified as the prime suspect. He had attended a party the night of the murders near the area and JB's car was later found. The man had left town shortly after the murders, raising suspicion. Police interviewed him 3 times in Michigan but were unable to provide a clear explanation for the 3 to 4 hour gap in his alibi for the night of the murder. However, these statements were never made public by police. The case against him was eventually dropped after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Another key lead police are investigating is the driver of a small white pickup truck that was spotted at the Big Little store. Security footage captured the truck at the gas station when JB and Tracy stopped to call Tracy's mother from a payphone. The video quality was poor and did not show the driver or anyone getting in or out of the truck. It was impossible to follow a digital trail, as there was no record of gas being purchased at the gas station at the time. After releasing photos of the truck to the media, police asked the public for information, but as leads went cold, the driver and truck were never found. The last potential lead was a Mississippi man who had been extradited to Ozark from Jones County on an unrelated charge of possession of drug paraphernalia. The man had stayed with relatives in Ozark for a short time before leaving town 2 days after the murder, prompting police to question him. However, the questioning yielded no significant information and, without evidence, they were forced to release him. A woman contacted police in March 2000, reporting that she had heard screaming and 2 gunshots on the night of July 31, 1999, near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits. When asked about her delayed report, she explained that she feared being implicated. Police searched the area thoroughly based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used in the murders of Tracy and JB. However, the make of the bullet did not match the brand of the shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, the bullet had no markings that could be used to forensically compare it to other evidence in the case. Unfortunately, this lead ended up being another dead end for the police. Several leads in the JB and Tracy case eventually ran into dead ends, but police were determined to find a DNA match. As JB and Tracy's grieving families tried to move on with their lives, the case went cold. Years later, however, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. A major breakthrough came in 2015 when Rena, an auxiliary Ozark police officer, came forward and publicly accused an Ozark police officer of killing JB and Tracy and others of covering up the incident. Rena made several serious allegations related to a 1999 incident in Ozark. According to her, a police officer stopped a man named JB on the night of July 31, 1999, looking for cassette tapes containing recordings of conversations. These tapes allegedly implicated Ozark police officers in a cocaine distribution and profiteering scheme. Rena asserted that the search for the tapes ultimately led to the murders of the 2 innocent girls. Rena further alleged that several law enforcement officers knew the identity of the killer but chose to cover it up by destroying evidence. They also allegedly threatened her to keep her from speaking out. She specifically named 3 police officers, Gary "Butch" Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as harassing and threatening her. Rena further accused then-police Chief Tony Spivey, who led the initial investigation, of being involved in the cover-up. However, she did not reveal the identity of the specific police officer she believed was responsible for the murders. Noted American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article discussing the case. John B. believes that the officer involved thought that Tracy and JB would use the tapes as evidence in a trial scheduled for August 2, 1999, just 48 hours after they were killed. However, John B. also claims that Rena was severely beaten with a baseball bat after speaking out, which prevented her from naming the real killer. The officers Rena accused all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracy. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever officially named as suspects in the case. Regardless, the allegations exploded on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary "Butch" Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officers, filed a defamation of character lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of molesting JB's sister and was given a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Over the years, police investigated multiple theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It took 20 years and the advancement of new DNA technology before police were able to make an arrest. In March 2019, police sent DNA found on JB's body and clothing to Virginia-based Parabon Nano Laboratories, which specializes in DNA. Using a public genealogical database to analyze the suspect's DNA and match it to genetic information led police to a breakthrough in the case. The new evidence linked DNA found at the crime scene to a suspect named Coley McCraney, a man in his 40s. At the time, Coley was not a suspect in the 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett, but the discovery changed everything. Coley, an Alabama native, had led a relatively normal life before his DNA linked him to the crimes. Born in Alabama, Coley attended and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an accomplished athlete and served as president of the school's library club. After completing high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. Coley's personal life involved several marriages. He married his first wife in 1992 but separated 2 years later and eventually divorced. During this time, his ex-wife accused him of assault and filed a complaint with the Air Force. After the divorce, Coley remarried in 2001 and started a family with his second wife. With the exception of a child support issue in 1998, Coley has no prior criminal record or criminal history. Coley spent 20 years as a truck driver for various companies in Alabama. In addition to his trucking career, he recently co-founded a church and served as a bishop. At the time of the murders, Coley was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where J.B. and Tracy's bodies were discovered in 1999. 20 years after the murders, Coley was arrested on March 19, 2019, following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama. During an interview with police, Coley claimed that he did not know J.B. and Tracy. Police did not provide any information about his possible motive. Coley's arrest took the Ozark community by surprise, especially Police Chief Marlon Walker, who attended school with him. Rena Crum, 53, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the killings, withdrew her charges at a hearing in August 2022. Coley McCraney, 49, is facing 5 counts of attempted murder for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett and is being held without bail in the Dale County Jail ahead of his trial, which is scheduled for April 17, 2023. At trial, Coley admitted that he knew J.B. He had a conversation with J.B. several weeks before the killings in which she introduced herself as Jennifer at the Wiregrass Commons Mall. He testified that on the day of the killings, he and J.B. had consensual sex in his truck. He said he never knew that Jennifer was J.B. Beasley. On April 26, 2023, a jury found Coley McCraney guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. In July 2023, a Dale County District Court judge denied Coley's request for a new trial. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Mikhail Bush. Mikhail Bush was born on February 13, 1997, in Alberta, Canada. She is the eldest of 2 daughters. She attended a local high school, where she met Cody McConnell. They began their relationship in the summer of 2014, later their relationship blossomed and they decided to start a family together. After graduating, Mikhail worked at a public organization that supported people with disabilities by finding nurses and meeting their needs. There, she realized her passion for helping people. At work, she learned the basics of healthcare and decided to pursue a career in nursing. To achieve this, she needed formal training, so Mikhail enrolled at Northwest College in Edmonton. She devoted all her free time to studying, determined to become a skilled professional. Working in the medical field in Canada is respected and well paid. This meant that pursuing a major that she loved would allow her to support their small family. Her relationship with Cody grew stronger, and he supported her in her studies. At that time, they lived together. In 2019, shortly after graduating, she found out she was pregnant. This was an important and anticipated event for the young couple, and they were very excited. Everything went as well as could be. Their dream of expanding their family became a reality. Soon after, the young couple got married and began preparing for their future child. On April 17, 2020, they welcomed a son named Noah McConnell. After his birth, Mikhail and Cody devoted themselves to taking care of their child and supported each other wholeheartedly. At this time, Mikhail and Cody lived happily together. Noah was a very cute child. He rarely cried, and when he did, it usually stopped very quickly. However, a few months later, Cody had difficulty working and was easily tired, so his wife Mikhail advised him to go to the hospital. After the examination, Cody was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Because of this, he lost his job. Cody was on sick leave for a long time, but during this time, they always supported and understood each other. The couple tried their best to maintain their happiness. After a while, Cody was able to return to his job. He worked in the installation of turboprop engines, a job that required frequent business trips to different cities. This sudden change in lifestyle naturally affected the family. At that time, Mikhail was a housewife, taking care of her children without a regular job. In order to avoid being apart for a long time, they decided to buy a mobile home. Life on the road was difficult, but the family stayed together. By August 2020, their life had undergone significant positive changes. Cody secured a higher-paying job, allowing him to spend more time at home. The couple traveled frequently to different locations, but they had the opportunity to rent an apartment in Hinton, Alberta. This small town is 3 hours west of Edmonton, near Jasper National Park. The move, which meant they no longer had to live on the road, marked a long-awaited change in their family life. In early September, the couple and their child moved into their new home. The apartment was much more spacious than their previous home and certainly larger than the small trailer they had been living in. Cody could finally settle down with his family and focus on building a life together. However, the young couple had no idea that their happiness would soon turn into a nightmare so severe that a change in the law would be necessary. On September 16, 2021, in Canada, the day started like any other morning for the family. Cody took his child for a walk and they spent money on entertainment, something they could not afford before. Now that life had improved, Cody was able to spend more time with his 16-month-old son. Cody then went to work as usual, leaving his wife at home. His shift ended around 5 or 6 p.m., and he returned home, eager to spend more time with his son. However, when he got home, the apartment was quiet. The child did not respond to his name or make any noises as usual. The silence was alarming. After searching all the rooms, Cody realized that his family was actually not home, which was unusual. Cody thought that his wife might have gone to the store with the baby for a while. But upon closer inspection, he realized that was unlikely, as the stroller was still in the apartment, neatly folded and untouched. Without the stroller, they would not have gone for a walk, and his wife's car was still parked outside, which made him even more worried. Cody ran around the apartment screaming, but the silence made him suspicious. In the kitchen, he discovered another worrying sign. His wife had started cooking dinner but had stopped abruptly. The groceries were still on the table, some cut and some still intact. It seemed like something had interrupted her, which made Cody extremely worried. He tried calling his wife but couldn't get through. With no answer and growing increasingly worried, he decided to take action. Although he didn't want to believe that anything bad had happened, he hoped they had just gone to a nearby park or plaza and lost track of time. Desperate to find her, he set off immediately. With increasing anxiety, he searched alleys and parks but found no trace of his wife and son. After going through the area around the apartment complex several times, he contacted friends and family, hoping that she was with someone he knew. However, no one heard or saw her all day. Around 7 p.m., in desperation, Cody called the police to report that his wife and son were missing. Cody called a friend named Jareth, who came to their home to help. Together, they began searching the neighborhood, still hoping to find Mikhail and his son without police intervention. They checked the apartment again and walked around the entire apartment complex several times. Unable to calm down, they began going from apartment to apartment, knocking on doors and asking neighbors if they had seen or heard anything. When the police arrived, Cody and Jarrett were still searching. The police had to calm them down. Since Cody and Jareth were not professionals, their search could disrupt or destroy important evidence. Therefore, the police instructed them to stop their search efforts. The police thoroughly searched the apartment, the surrounding residential area, and nearby squares and parks, but like Cody, they were unable to find anything. Cody's next-door neighbor, Robert, told the police that he had witnessed an unknown man running out of Cody's apartment that day. Although he could not provide further details, the neighbor's account raised suspicions. Therefore, the police decided to consult with the apartment manager to gain access to surveillance camera footage. They wanted to determine when and why Mikhail and the child disappeared. Whether she had run away or been kidnapped. There was speculation that a lover might have been involved, but Cody adamantly denied this. He said he had a happy family. Initially, police found no signs of forced entry, struggle, or blood in the family's apartment. Police also considered whether there had been a kidnapper. However, how could the perpetrator have entered without any signs of forced entry? It was probably someone Mikhail knew and trusted enough to open the door for. When police reviewed the surveillance footage, they found no evidence to support the neighbor's claim that a stranger had entered Mikhail's apartment. Instead of catching the mysterious stranger, the footage showed the neighbor taking a bag out of her apartment and throwing it in the apartment complex's trash bin. Mikhail and her son were not seen in the surveillance footage, raising suspicions about the neighbor's involvement in the disappearance. Meanwhile, Cody and Jarrett anxiously waited for news near home, eventually staying at another neighbor's apartment. Cody was expecting his wife and child to return. At 2 a.m., at the apartment where Cody was staying, the police knocked on the door. However, they did not have good news for Cody. Instead, they asked him to move to a hotel while the investigation was ongoing. The police stated that waiting was useless. They needed to take a closer look at the apartment and the area around the house. In fact, the police did not come by accident. They did not want to tell Cody that his child had been found dead, because they had to confirm the prime suspect. The next morning, Cody, who had not slept all night, went to the police station for questioning after leaving his home. The police asked him the usual questions to piece together the events of the previous day. However, many of the questions left him confused, leading him to suspect that something was wrong. The police then revealed that Noah's body was found in a trash can inside the residence. Noah had been strangled, with a man's sock in her mouth and a plastic bag over her head. Some of Mikhail's belongings were found, but her body was not found. Chance for his wife and children to return home safely was gone. Receiving news from the police, he was horrified and in pain when his child died tragically. During the night, Cody was asked to leave the apartment because the police did not want to draw attention to the arrest of the neighbor who lived next door. The police, skeptical of the neighbor Robert's story, visited him again and asked to check his apartment, where the police found a body in the bathroom. She was small and lying face down, but the worst part was that her entire body had been cut into pieces. Experts found evidence of sexual violence committed after her death. The McHales had only moved into the complex a few weeks ago. They had barely had time to see some of the neighbors. With Robert, they had hardly ever seen him. Cody thought they had a quiet, unassuming neighbor who didn't want to draw attention to himself. Robert kept his distance from everyone. Now, it was clear that the most dangerous guy was living among them, but no one knew about it. What the neighbors didn't know was that Robert Maid had been arrested on suspicion of murder and child abuse. During a background check, police discovered that Robert had a criminal record with 24 convictions, including 2 for sexual violence. He was first charged with a felony for assaulting a girl in the early 2000s. It is unclear whether he ever served any prison time for this crime. Then, in 2012, Robert was charged with a brutal sex crime. He posed as a nanny to gain the trust of a couple and, when he picked up their child, raped the child instead of going for a walk in the park. He is suspected of being involved in other similar incidents. Robert was arrested and convicted for this crime, but only served 3 years. While in prison, he attended a special rehabilitation program for sex offenders, received psychological support, and attended church regularly. Robert was released from prison after psychiatrists deemed him ready to re-enter society. However, this assessment proved to be incorrect. Just a few years after his release, he expressed a desire to harm innocent people. The police reviewed his test results while in prison and found that he had not been rehabilitated. Instead, he preferred to attack children and young women for the thrill of it. Since there was no legal basis to detain him any longer, Edmonton police could only warn that Robert was dangerous and likely to harm someone again. This man was clearly a threat to women, and especially young children. In order to protect society from potential rapists, many restrictions were placed on him. Specifically, he was prohibited from being near children and women, and could not live near schools or parks. Robert was also subject to a curfew and could only leave Edmonton with official permission from his supervising police officer. After his release from prison, he strictly followed these regulations for many years. He was monitored, so he did not appear in crime reports. However, over time it became clear that he had been waiting for an opportunity to commit a crime. Under Canadian law, a convicted sex offender can be removed from the Dangerous Offender Register if they have not been involved in any similar incidents for a year. In June 2020, this happened to one such offender. Despite his extensive criminal history, a court decision removed the rapist from police supervision. This allowed him, to move to a new residential area, a move that had previously been restricted. Now, he is unsupervised and unmonitored. The public was outraged by the tragic situation. By removing the restrictions on the offender, the police endangered the lives of women and children in the area. Cody said people deserved to know that they were living near a dangerous rapist, giving them the opportunity to relocate if necessary. The investigation found that 2 victims were killed before police were notified. It was discovered that Robert and the victims were just neighbors in a senior housing complex. They did not know or communicate with each other. During questioning, Robert openly confessed to these motives. As before, he informed the police staff. He struggled with the urge to kill and physically abuse at the same time. He admitted that he was a sick person who needed to be prayed for and confessed that he enjoyed the process. Robert believed that he needed to be isolated from society, otherwise, he feared that he would repeat his actions. Cody, who had just lost his entire family, was visited by his brothers, friends, co-workers, neighbors, and concerned citizens who came to pay their respects. It was believed that if there had not been a system error, the police would have continued to monitor this dangerous criminal and McHale would still be alive. Cody attended all the hearings, wearing his wife's wedding ring around his neck and carrying a blue blanket. Deeply saddened, he was determined to defend his rights. Even through tears, he insisted that ordinary citizens should be informed about potentially dangerous criminals living nearby. Until recently, ordinary Canadians did not have access to databases of dangerous criminals. Wanting to protect other families, Cody McConnell launched a campaign to change the existing laws. The effort, dubbed Noah's Law in honor of his young son, Robert pleaded guilty to all charges and recounted the events of that day in court. He said that after Cody left for work, Cody's wife and son went for a walk in a nearby park. When they returned home, they encountered the apartment manager. The manager informed McHale that Cody had made a mess in the hallway the day before and asked him to clean it up. Sure enough, Cody had made a mess the day before, leaving a mark. McHale apologized for the mess and promised to clean it up, she planning to do so later. At that moment, Robert overheard the conversation and saw it as the perfect opportunity to act. McHale entered the apartment with the child, fed Noah, and planned to put him to bed. While the child was playing, McHale began cooking dinner and called her friend. During the phone conversation, there was a knock on the door. The friend later testified that she had heard the knock, although it was faint due to the distance. Robert offered to help clean up since she was busy watching the child. The woman thanked him for his help and agreed. Her conversation with her friend then ended. After cleaning up, Robert found an excuse to enter McHale's apartment. When he gained access to her home, suddenly, Robert attacked her, strangling her with his hands for about 10 minutes. Even then, McHale still showed signs of life, so Robert took an electrical cord from an appliance and wrapped it around her neck until she stopped breathing. He raped her, then quietly dragged her to his apartment through the hallway, placing her in the bathroom. Robert then took a knife and inflicted wounds on her body, even removing some of her organs. The police could not find these organs during the investigation and they were not found in the trash cans, like Noah. Meanwhile, the child was still alive and in the apartment. However, Robert considered the child a threat, so he decided to get rid of the child. He took the child to his apartment and tried to gag the child with a sock. He then suffocated the child by placing a plastic bag over his head. He then placed the body in a trash bag and threw it in a dumpster. During the trial, Robert's behavior was inconsistent. He insists that he is not a bad person and blames mental health issues. However, he also admits that he needs to be separated from society. The idea is that criminals should never be removed from the database if they pose an increased threat. There should be increased police surveillance without any time limits. It is also suggested that residents in nearby areas should be notified if there is a potentially dangerous person living near them. Cody stated that he would never move his family into the same apartment complex as someone like Robert. Currently, the dissemination of requests and proposals to protect the rights of all residents in the country continues. This theme resonates and continues to grow. During the trial, Robert Keith Major, 55, was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Rachel McLean. Rachel McLean returned home to Blackpool, UK, for the summer of 1990. She was 18 years old and had just finished her first year at Oxford. Rachel was very busy with her studies and spent all her free time studying. She had a healthy lifestyle and played sports. Rachel had many friends and loved heavy metal music. She joined a local charity where she worked during the summer. While on a day off, Rachel was relaxing with friends at a local club when she met a bartender named John Turner, who had long brown hair. John was from Nottingham and had returned to Blackpool for the summer. Rachel found him attractive and easy to talk to, so they quickly became interested in each other. That night, they chatted. John attended Rachel's 19th birthday party. After the party, they had a passionate night together. According to John, their relationship continued to develop. However, at the end of the summer. Rachel had to return to Oxford, and John returned to Nottingham. The two cities were just over 2 hours' drive apart, so they could easily visit each other. They spent weekends together and kept in touch by letter and phone during the week. John wrote Rachel long love letters, which she enjoyed. John Turner was born in HMP, but as a child he moved to New Zealand with his parents and settled in a city called Bath. The family lived in 2 countries before John returned to the UK to study at King's College. During his time there, he won the hearts of both students and teachers. He hosted a show on the local college radio station twice a week and was a talented athlete on the soccer team. Rachel McLean was a promising student. Her literature teacher at college admired her achievements. Rachel started college in the same year as John. On Christmas, Rachel invited John to meet her parents and they had a nice evening together. Rachel's parents were very happy with her choice, finding John intelligent, good-looking and confident. John became increasingly infatuated with Rachel but was saddened by the distance between them. During this time, she moved into a student apartment on the first floor of the school with 4 other students. John felt anxious and jealous because one of her neighbors was a man and the boys often visited her house. To cope, he wrote and called her constantly. However, Rachel was very busy with work and study. Since there were no mobile phones in those days, they could only communicate by landline. She would often come home at the end of the evening, exhausted, and go straight to bed. She did not have the opportunity to communicate with John regularly. His dissatisfaction increased with each missed call and he became increasingly jealous. His possessiveness became evident during this time and he complained to her, which began to annoy Rachel. On February 11th, she sent him a Valentine's card, calling him the only love of her life. However, around that time, she wrote in her diary about her lover in very unflattering terms. It seemed that she had doubts about whether John was the person she could spend the rest of her life with. On Valentine's Day, John proposed to her, but she unexpectedly refused, which shocked him. She explained that she was not ready. John said that he understood and would wait. They continued their relationship, calling each other occasionally and rarely seeing each other. 2 months later, in April, they planned to spend the Easter holidays together. John went to Blackpool again on Saturday, and Rachel's mother took her back to Oxford because she had important school matters to attend to on Sunday. They planned to have a quiet day together at her student flat, as it was their last weekend before Rachel's exams. Rachel spent a lot of time preparing for her exams. While she was studying, her boyfriend was watching football in the living room because he was a Nottingham fan. That weekend, the team played in the FA Cup semi-finals, so the next day John got on the train and returned to Nottingham. There was no one in the student flat all week because the young people had gone home for the holidays. Everyone wanted to spend time with their loved ones because they wouldn't have the chance until the end of the year. By Monday, her roommates began to return, eager to see Rachel and hear about her weekend. However, Rachel was missing. Her room was empty, the windows were open, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. The students assumed she was busy with other activities. On Wednesday, her boyfriend, John, tried to call her, but she did not answer. They had planned to stay in touch, but Rachel did not return his calls. John assumed that she was busy and did not want to bother her. However, after 2 days of silence, which was unusual since their relationship had only recently improved, John began to worry. He called again, but still received no response. The next day, he tried again, but was unsuccessful. There was no social media at the time, so John left a message on her answering machine. But she remained silent. He also sent her a letter by regular mail, which he sent as soon as he got home. The letter arrived in New Mexico on Thursday, and John thanked Rachel for a wonderful weekend and wished her luck with her exams. On April 19, 1991, 19-year-old Rachel failed to show up for her exam, which was especially worrying because she had been studying hard and the exam was extremely important to her. When the exam proctors tried to contact her, they were unsuccessful. Her parents also had no idea where she was, prompting them to report her missing to the police. The Oxford police were initially skeptical. They received dozens of missing student reports each month because parents went to the police station after parties. In 99% of cases, teens sobered up from drinking and returned to school within 24 hours. But that was not the case. This diligent student had been missing for days and had not been heard from at all. None of her friends knew where she was, so the police became interested in what had happened. They immediately went to the apartment where Rachel had gone missing. Detective Susie Krug was looking for information about the students who had been in the same room as Rachel. Victoria Clare, Margaret Smith, Sarah Hume, and John Forby. The friends immediately pointed to Rachel's boyfriend, who was annoying everyone with his jealousy. They showed a letter he had sent from Nottingham around the time Rachel went missing. The neighbors also confirmed that John Turner was the last person Rachel had been in contact with. The room they checked showed no signs of forced entry, robbery, struggle, or blood. Everything was in its place. The police found Rachel's diary, which might contain important clues. The police began to study the contents of the diary. They knew that John was possessive and jealous of his girlfriend, wanting to know her whereabouts and presence at all times. This behavior gradually began to annoy Rachel. Their conflicts often arose over this issue. On April 22, police met with John Turner. 22. During the conversation, John expressed concern about his missing girlfriend. He was asked to describe his activities during the time Rachel went missing. John mentioned that they had a great weekend together and that everything was fine before they broke up. He said that he woke up early, showered, and that they had sex in the afternoon. After lunch, they went to Oxford Station together at around 4:15 p.m., taking a bus. They had a few hours before their train arrived, and while waiting, they bumped into a friend of Rachel's at around 5 p.m. The three of them went to a local coffee shop and had coffee. Rachel's friend was described as a dark-skinned man with long hair, wearing ripped jeans and a black jacket. He was similar in appearance to John, except for his dark skin. John admitted that he could not remember the man's name because they had just met and he did not expect to become friends with him. According to John, the man offered to drive Rachel home in his car. She agreed, and then John and Rachel said goodbye. John returned to Nottingham, while Rachel went with her friend to her apartment. However, John's story about the man was very suspicious. The police suspected that John was lying, and he quickly became the prime suspect in Rachel's disappearance, as she had been missing for a long time, leading to concerns that she might be dead or imprisoned. Urgent action was needed. First, it was important to learn more about the prime suspect, as he was the last known person to have had contact with Rachel, and his story about a black man needed further investigation. Rachel's disappearance left everyone baffled because none of her roommates or friends remembered her having such a friend. In order to gather more witnesses, the police shared information about the case. From the beginning, there was no reason to think that she had run away. The police first checked this possibility by talking to Rachel's family and friends. Rachel had no problems with her loved ones, friends, studies, or personal life. She was eagerly preparing for exams, which made it impossible for her to not attend. Rachel never complained about any problems, nor did she suffer from drug addiction or mental problems. People like her usually do not run away, and all of her belongings were left untouched. This allowed the police to rule out the possibility that she had run away on purpose. The police were skeptical of John's testimony and assigned a police officer to approach him and gain his trust. The officer's job was to observe John's reactions and behavior while updating him on the investigation. From the beginning, the officer suspected John of lying to them, noticing that he became nervous when talking about Rachel, despite his attempts to hide it. Despite these suspicions, a week of surveillance did not reveal any useful information to help the case. Meanwhile, the police were searching the neighborhood for witnesses, K9 units were working with dogs, and divers were examining local waters. Several people remembered seeing John, but no one could confirm that he had left the house with Rachel. In addition, he had not been behaving suspiciously, so this witness's testimony did not add anything to the search. During this time, John continued to cooperate with the investigation. He even helped create a composite sketch of the man who, according to him, was supposed to drive Rachel back to her apartment. John believes this friend was responsible for her abduction. It has now been 2 weeks and police believe she is no longer alive. No ransom demands have been made, ruling out kidnapping as a motive. Search teams, including police, rescue workers, and volunteers, have scoured a large area around Oxford, including drains and boating holes, but their efforts have been in vain. The police examined Rachel's diary and discovered her true feelings for John, a disturbing mix of hatred and pity. She expressed that she was unable to confront him directly or leave because she was afraid. Rachel had no genuine feelings for John, and her Valentine's Day gestures were more like a duty than a genuine expression of love. She knew that John was unstable and prone to losing control when angry. Afraid to face this reality, she admitted that their closeness was harmful and needed to end. In stark contrast, John described their relationship as happy, often emphasizing their frequent sexual activity during interrogations. Meanwhile, Rachel wrote of her disgust for him but felt powerless to stop their closeness. The police believe he may have killed her after reading her diary and discovering her true feelings, but more evidence is needed to prove his guilt. John has been actively cooperating with the investigation. He has attended a press conference to draw public attention to the search for Rachel and to help reconstruct the last day he spent with her. John describes the events at the station, claiming that a stranger, whom he says was a dark-skinned friend of Rachel's, was involved in her disappearance. The plan is to closely monitor John's reactions and behavior during these events, as experienced journalists can identify inconsistencies in his story. Many people have noted that John's description of the dark-skinned guy closely matches his appearance, including his clothing, except for his skin color. It is as if he was trying to describe himself but changing his race. In addition, the public took note of John's strange reactions when asked if he thought Rachel was still alive. He vaguely stated, in his heart, he wanted to think so, which further aroused suspicion among the conference attendees. Throughout the conversation, the guy's smile never seemed to disappear. This event greatly promoted the investigation into Rachel's disappearance. Several random witnesses who were watching the press conference on television clearly remembered the events of the day the girl disappeared at the train station. They contacted the police, saying that only John was at the cafe at the station, there was no girl or anyone else with him. Among the witnesses was a man sitting at the next table. He noticed that John seemed very nervous while drinking coffee, constantly looking around and startled. According to this witness, at one point, John took out a piece of paper and started writing. Perhaps Rachel was no longer alive at that time, and John began writing the same letter he had sent immediately after arriving in Notting. All this was done to create an alibi for himself. It has been established that John and Rachel went to the station together by bus, although there were no cameras there at that time. However, during that time in the city, all passengers who boarded the bus and paid for their tickets were monitored by special electronic devices. It was impossible to ride without paying. When checked, it was discovered that Rachel had not paid for the trip, which showed that she was not with John and could not have been there that day. Therefore, John lied. The reason for his lie remains unclear, and it is still unknown where Rachel's body could be. Police suspected that her remains might still be in the student apartment or somewhere on campus. Surveillance cameras covered the area around the building, but none of them showed John carrying any large, suspicious items. Police requested a floor plan of the student dormitory and discovered that there were voids under the floorboards. Police returned to the apartment where Rachel had lived and removed the floorboards. There, they found her body tightly packed in a bag, only 20 centimeters high. The cold weather at the time slowed the body's decomposition. In addition, the space between floors was structurally well ventilated, so the decomposing body did not emit a foul odor and was not discovered until 19 days after her death. Because Rachel's body was so well preserved, the forensic expert was able to determine the circumstances of her death with a high degree of accuracy within an hour. John was then questioned by the police. Initially, he refused to answer police questions. However, the next day, he confessed to killing Rachel. He said that after watching a football match, he proposed to Rachel, hoping that she would accept, but she refused. The couple exchanged a few words. As a result, he lost his temper and attacked her. In his confession, John admitted that he did not understand why she refused to get engaged. She did not want to answer for a long time but finally admitted that she had been having an affair and that she was not sure that she was ready to commit her life to John. In response, he insulted her. Rachel tried to hit him, and after the slap, he lost control and pinned her down on the chair with his weight, preventing her from moving. John claimed that he did not remember what happened next. When he regained consciousness, he found himself sitting on a couch in front of Rachel's lifeless body. Forensic experts confirmed that Rachel had been strangled. There was a deep, thin mark on her neck, indicating the use of an object rather than hands. The tie Rachel had given him for Christmas was missing from the crime scene and from John's belongings, believed to have been used to kill her. After a while, he decided to dispose of the body. Unable to get the body out of the building, he put it in a bag, removed the floorboards from Rachel's room, and stuffed the body into a small space. He then quietly reinstalled the floorboards. John then packed his things and headed to the bus station. While waiting for the train at a coffee shop, he wrote a letter to Rachel. In the letter, he thanked her for the weekend they spent together and mentioned a black man who was supposed to drive her home, which was a made-up story. He had invented this character to support the lie he had created. He also expressed concern for his girlfriend, who would be alone for several days. After sending the letter, he called her several times and left messages on her answering machine. John then wrote another letter, addressed to Rachel in New Mexico, saying that he had tried to call her several times during the week and was very worried, hoping she would call back soon. This deception allowed him to fool the police and the public for 19 days. Afterward, despite his confession, John Turner maintained his innocence. In December 1991, John claimed that his actions were in self-defense. He wanted to avoid a life sentence for premeditated murder, so he argued that the girl's death was accidental. Rachel was described as argumentative and unfaithful, often insulting John. John also stressed the humiliation he suffered at the hands of Rachel. He had erectile dysfunction due to the disease and claimed that she constantly criticized him for it. This was especially difficult during the outbreak when he was unable to have sex with her due to pain in his groin and abdomen. In court, his lawyer portrayed him as the victim. He was a caring man in love, dreamed of marrying Rachel and proposed to her twice, both times being rejected. Of course, all of this is not true, because judging by the diary entries, the girl was generally uncomfortable with intimate contact with John. There is no evidence that Rachel had any intrigue or relationship with anyone else. Rachel's close friends did not know about any other guy. Many believe that she made up the story of the affair to justify her quick breakup with John, but it is possible that she never actually said this, it was just his word. In the end, the jury did not believe John and he was sentenced to life in prison with the right to parole. John's story does not end there. While serving his sentence, he developed a relationship with a 20-year-old woman who looked exactly like Rachel. She learned about him through a newspaper article and became interested, believing that he had been wrongly convicted. Despite being imprisoned, they began a romantic relationship. Lawyers continued to fight for John's release and maintained his innocence. In 2003, after 11 years behind bars, John was paroled. He returned to New Zealand, intending to start his life over. His girlfriend, whom he met while in prison, followed him to New Zealand to attend university in Whanganui, the city where John lived. Apparently, 11 years in prison did not benefit John because he then attacked and began strangling the new girl, who believed he was innocent. John was 49 at the time. Fortunately, the attack was not serious and the girl was able to escape without serious injury. According to several witnesses and victims, John had lost control of his temper several times in the 6 months leading up to the incident. It was clear that he had anger management issues. John often became jealous and turned small problems into big arguments, often insulting his partner in front of others. Some time after the initial incident, the situation recurred and he attacked her again. During this time, the couple were staying at a motel in the city of Whanganui. There, they argued again. John threw his girlfriend onto the bed, raised his fists and punched her in the face while holding her down with his weight. However, he regained his composure and left the room. A few hours later, the girl texted John, saying that she was ending the relationship. She said that he was dangerous and needed to attend an anger management program. In response, he flew into a rage again, returned to the motel and stormed into the room. He attacked her, tore her clothes off, demanded sex, hit her on the head several times and threatened to kill her. In 2018, the girl reported John to the police and he was charged with assault. He was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. The sentence was relatively light because the conviction occurred in New Zealand. If the attack had happened in the UK, he would have faced a life sentence. Despite the attack, his new girlfriend told the media that she believes anger management is still an issue for John and that he needs help. She hopes he can control his anger and that they can rekindle their relationship, despite the mental and physical abuse he has inflicted on her. In court, she admitted that he had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him, although she did not take the threat seriously. John has recently been released from prison, but his current situation is unknown. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Miles. Sandra was born on May 26, 1949, in the small, cozy town of Harn, Kansas, USA. She had a close relationship with her sister. They attended the same school, walked together, and spent time with their family. After graduating from high school, Sandra focused on starting a family. She was in a serious relationship with her boyfriend, and they decided to get married. They welcomed a son named Chad. Unfortunately, the marriage did not work out. Sandra quickly realized that her husband was not the right match for her. After the divorce, Sandra found another partner, but that relationship also ended in disappointment, leading her to break up with him as well. In 1976, Sandra, a single mother, got a job at a factory that made pumps and pistons for industrial machinery. This job required her family to relocate to a larger city, Hutchinson. In her new position, Sandra proved herself and gained the respect of management through her hard work and responsibility. She performed her tasks exceptionally well. It was during this time that she met her third husband, Jerry Miles. They were instantly attracted to each other, and their friendship quickly blossomed into romance, leading to their decision to marry. Their marriage happened rapidly, but it was evident that Jerry and Sandra truly loved each other and were eager to get married. A year later, Sandra was expecting a baby with her new husband. In September of that year, they welcomed their daughter, Tracy, who brought immense joy to her parents, especially Sandra, who had always dreamed of having a large family. During this time, their marriage appeared to be perfect. The couple had a strong bond and prioritized their family above all else. Jerry's children regularly communicated with him and participated in family events. He particularly enjoyed spending time with Tracy at the nearby lake. To outsiders, their marriage appeared perfect. However, only close friends and family knew of the underlying issue. After 7 years of marriage, Sandra could no longer endure her husband's alcoholism. This revelation shocked many, as she had previously concealed the problem. Sandra ultimately chose to end her marriage to her third husband, Jerry, and raise their children by herself. She thought Jerry was a kind man when he was sober, but he had difficulty managing his drinking. When he drank, he became a completely different person. At first, he was able to control his drinking, but over time, his alcoholism became more and more evident. His relapses became more frequent, placing a heavy burden on Sandra. She worked every day at the factory to support the family and eventually became exhausted from the thing. Sandra always saw Jerry as a wonderful husband and father. Their relationship ended because he struggled with alcohol addiction. Even so, she continued to support their children while maintaining her job. This was a challenging time for her, but she was determined not to give up and managed to handle the difficulties well. Jerry offered some help, but when he succumbed to alcohol again, Sandra had to face all the challenges alone. Despite this, she stayed confident in her abilities and was driven to ensure her children had a bright future and everything they needed for a fulfilling life. It was certainly challenging, but Sandra Miles was not one to give up easily. She remained a conscientious mother, spending all her free time with her children. Despite facing difficulties, she handled them with grace, which brought her closer to her daughter Tracy during this time. Her son had grown up, moved out, and started his own life, but Tracy continues to support her mother because she realizes that Sandra's efforts are mainly to benefit her. In the spring of 1997, Sandra's relationship with Tracy, her 16-year-old daughter, began to deteriorate. Tracy has started dating her first boyfriend and is going through the rebellious phase that is common in adolescence. Sandra tried to improve their relationship. She thought her daughter's problems were only temporary. At the same time, Sandra was mindful of her own past failed marriages and felt the need to caution Tracy about the mistakes she made in her youth. Tracy's affection for her mother faded quickly, leading to a strained relationship between them. To win her daughter's love, Sandra bought Tracy a Black Moon car, which Tracy had longed for. This gift excited Tracy. She adored her car and made a point to arrive first at school every day so everyone would notice it. It seemed like Tracy had a bright future ahead, and she represented hope for Sandra. Sandra was determined to do whatever it took to help her daughter succeed. However, fate can be cruel. On March 20th, Sandra's son Chad and his girlfriend Mindy visited her with exciting news. Mindy was pregnant. Sandra was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother and eagerly anticipated the birth of her grandson. Unfortunately, Sandra would not live to see that moment. While Sandra's sister, Pat Douglas Butler, was having breakfast with her husband, she received an urgent call from Sandra's workplace. Sandra's employer reported that Sandra had been absent for 5 days. Concerned for her well-being, the boss tried to contact her but was unable to reach her. Pat also hadn't heard from her during this time, as they didn't typically call each other every day. Worried, Pat and her husband decided to visit Sandra's house to check if she was okay or if she needed help. When Pat and her husband arrived, they found the door locked and the house appeared deserted. This was strange because Sandra lived there with her daughter, Tracy, who was usually very active and should have been home at that time. Then, Pat and her husband went to the school to look for Tracy. The teachers were confused as Tracy had also been absent for several days. The class teacher, Noni, tried to call the family, but no one answered. Alarmed by the situation, Pat decided to call the police to report the disappearance of both Sandra and Tracy. The officers took Pat's statement and assessed the situation. When they arrived, Pat was waiting for them and handed over a spare key to the front door that she had kept. Law enforcement officers entered the house and immediately detected a strong, unpleasant smell of decomposition, unmistakable in nature. The experienced patrol officers recognized the importance of preserving the crime scene to protect the evidence, so they called for backup. When additional police officers arrived, they discovered the decomposed body of a woman lying on her bed, covered with a blanket. Upon removing the blanket, they found a power cord from a household appliance wrapped around her neck, indicating she likely died from strangulation. Additionally, there were multiple injuries visible on her face and head. Due to the severe level of decomposition, the victim's identity could not be immediately determined. It was unclear how many blows she had suffered or what exactly was hit with, but it was clear that her death was not natural, it was a murder. A forensic medical examination was needed to understand the details surrounding her death. However, dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sandra Miles. Besides, they could not find Tracy in the house, indicating that she was missing. At first, detectives thought Tracy might also be a victim of the same attacker. They searched the house thoroughly, but found no evidence suggesting she had been harmed like her mother. It was possible that Tracy had been kidnapped, placing her in great danger and requiring immediate action. She was added to the missing persons list, and the search for her began. It was unclear who would wish harm on Sandra, a woman who devoted her life to creating a future for her children. When Detective Hutchinson began investigating the case, they considered every possibility, including neighbors and her ex-husband. The aim was to uncover who had a motive for the murder of 48-year-old Sandra Miles and the disappearance of Tracy. Sandra's family, sister, son, and ex-husband were quickly informed of the tragic news. All were in shock. Sandra seemed to have no enemies and was known as a kind and gentle person who worked hard to overcome life's difficulty and support her daughter. It was hard to believe anyone could be so cruel to someone defenseless. Tracy's brother, Chad, made an appeal through the newspaper, asking locals to help find Tracy, his only surviving family member who had been taken from him. Forensic experts have revealed harrowing details of Sandra's last moments. Sandra had been knocked to the ground by repeated blows to her head with a blunt object. While she was incapacitated, a power cord was used to strangle her. The presence of large bruises and internal bleeding indicated she endured a prolonged and violent assault. The medical examiner believed there were likely at least 2 attackers. Investigators suggested that the incident was a robbery gone wrong, possibly triggered when Sandra confronted the intruders as they attempted to steal from her home. Sandra might have seen them, then a fight broke out, and they murdered her because they were afraid she would report to the police. However, after inspecting the crime scene, detectives found this scenario unlikely. There were no signs of a break-in, and the house lost nothing, except Tracy's favorite car. It didn't make sense to commit murder for the sake of theft. The brutality of Sandra's injuries was notable. An ordinary robber wouldn't have wasted time with strangulation, they would have shot her to avoid confrontation. The severe damage to her upper body indicated that the injuries were not a result of panic from being caught, but rather a deliberate attack meant to kill. This level of cruelty suggested a culmination of a long-standing feud. Another possibility considered was that of a maniacal attacker, but generally, such individuals act alone. This crime, however, was clearly carried out by multiple people given the severity of the injuries. Now, the killers had taken Tracy captive, making it urgent to locate the criminals. The detectives believed that Sandra had willingly let her attackers into the house, as there were no signs of forced entry. Therefore, they recognized the need to continue the investigation. The police contacted all of Sandra's relatives, friends, neighbors, and co-workers as part of their investigation. The police focused particularly on her ex-husbands, as they might have motives rooted in resentment. Sandra's third husband, Jerry, who struggled with alcoholism, drew significant attention. He may have been unhappy after the divorce, and the detective speculated that he could have confronted Sandra while intoxicated, possibly leading to her death. However, the detectives to find that he had an alibi, so he was removed from the list of suspects. Police interviewed all of Sandra's acquaintances to identify suspects in the violent massacre and possibly Tracy's kidnapping. Sandra's sister, Pat, informed detectives that she last saw Sandra alive 5 days earlier. On that day, she received a work call around the same time Tracy visited the school where she studied, making it a key date in the investigation. Efforts to gather information from friends and acquaintances were unproductive. So detectives turned to the neighbors. They discovered that the neighborhood was peaceful and close-knit, where everyone was familiar with one another. The next day, news of the incident at Sandra's house spread quickly. A crowd gathered in the yard and driveway, prompting the police to restrict access to the area. Many neighbors stopped by out of curiosity, anxious to learn what had happened. There was a growing concern in everyone, as they realized a dangerous killer, and possibly a kidnapper, was still at large, especially since there had been no word from Tracy. Fortunately, some witnesses in the crowd provided valuable information to the detectives. A neighbor who lived directly across the street reported seeing Tracy about 5 days earlier, on March 25th. He had noticed her with 2 young men. They all got into one of the guy's cars and drove away, and he never saw them again. This account raised questions about the nature of Tracy's disappearance, as it didn't fit the typical scenario of a schoolgirl being kidnapped. The friends, identified as Mark and Jay, lived nearby, so the detectives decided to interview them at their homes. Mark quickly left as several police officers spotted a red car in the distance. When Mark noticed the police approaching, he sped away and vanished at high speed. This behavior seemed suspicious, so one of the detectives alerted the patrol nearby about his direction. Mark wouldn't have fled so rapidly if he weren't trying to hide something from the police. Luckily, it didn't take long for them to catch up. Mark was eventually stopped just a few kilometers from his home. Mark was driving his car with a friend who was anxious about the recent tragedy at Sandra's house. The 2 young men attempted to convince the police that their fear was the only reason for their unusual behavior, but seasoned detectives sensed they were hiding something. Consequently, both were taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, the young men insisted they were merely frightened by the news of the incident at the Miles residence. Their stories closely matched, but the police found no solid evidence against them, so they were released. However, they became important witnesses because the police were aware that Tracy had recently been in a relationship with a young man named Jeremy Bell. They also knew that Sandra disapproved of him, believing he would have a negative impact on her daughter's life. Eventually, Tracy broke up with Jeremy and started dating Paul Nelson. Several witnesses stated that shortly before the tragedy, Tracy had a significant argument with her mother over Jeremy and Paul, both of whom Sandra disapproved. Detectives began interviewing numerous teenagers connected to this group. It was established that Tracy's ex, Jeremy, had a volatile temperament and had even made threats against Paul. However, Paul was not the main reason for Tracy and Jeremy's breakup. That was largely due to Sandra's disapproval, which may have prompted Jeremy's hostility toward her. In fact, the relationship between Sandra and Jeremy was extremely strained. Sandra had to go to the police station to obtain a restraining order against Jeremy. He accused her of ruining his relationship with her daughter, Tracy, and threatened her, although he never acted on these threats. During drunken parties, he often expressed how much Sandra bothered him to his friends. Sandra was determined to protect her daughter from him, which only led to more conflicts. It was known that Jeremy was already on the police's radar due to his numerous violations, and the restraining order worsened the situation. He clearly held a grudge against Sandra, which raised concerns that he could have kidnapped Tracy. At this point, detectives believed that Jeremy had killed Sandra and was now holding Tracy captive. They decided to question Jeremy, who, along with his friend William Lennon, had been arrested for burglary on the 1st of the month, just a few days before Sandra's murder. Since Jeremy was in prison during the time of the murder, he could not have been involved in Sandra's death. The fate of Tracy remained uncertain. The kidnapper had not made any demands, leading the police to fear that she might already be dead, although there was still a chance she was being held hostage. Time was of the essence for her safety. When investigators spoke with Jeremy in prison, he explained that he was not in a relationship with Tracy at the time of Sandra's murder due to a restraining order that required him to avoid contact with her. As a result, they broke up. During this time, Tracy began dating another man, Paul Nelson, which led Jeremy to distance himself from her. The police noticed that Jeremy appeared to strongly dislike Paul and openly expressed a desire to confront. Jeremy accused Paul of encouraging Tracy to engage in criminal behavior and worried that she might become involved with drugs because of her relationship with him. However, he stated that he did not harbor any ill feelings toward Sandra. In fact, their communication improved once Tracy started dating Paul. As Sandra shifted her anger towards Paul, Jeremy supported Sandra during this time. On March 25th, just before Sandra's murder, Jeremy warned Tracy about her new boyfriend, Paul, whom he considered dangerous. By that time, the autopsy results were complete. The medical examiner determined that Sandra died on March 26 from 4 stab wounds and significant blunt force trauma to the head. These injuries were confirmed as the cause of death, and strangulation was also used to ensure she was dead. The police needed to locate Paul Nelson, the main suspect, to question him. However, he was missing. His parents reported that he hadn't been seen since March 26. Like Tracy, detectives believed he was involved in Sandra's murder. They needed to find him and uncover what happened to Tracy, but they could only address that after detaining he. Investigators discovered that Paul had been in regular contact with his friend Zwickle, with whom he had lived before going into hiding. When detectives spoke with Zwickle, he provided valuable information. He confirmed that Sandra did not approve of the relationship between Tracy and Paul. Sandra believed that Paul, Tracy's new boyfriend, was a bad influence and was trying to get her involved with drugs. Despite Sandra's objections, Tracy and Paul continued to meet secretly. After several weeks, Sandra found out about it and was upset. She told her daughter that getting involved with a drug addict was a big mistake. Despite this, she refused to face the truth. Her mother urged her to end the relationship with Paul. Sandra then informed Tracy that if she wanted a family and children, she would need to move in with Paul. This news surprised both Tracy and Paul, as they had nowhere to live. Sandra advised Tracy to think about ending her pregnancy, and Tracy consented. However, their relationship worsened after the abortion. A shocking moment for Tracy was when Sandra threatened to take her car keys if she didn't end her relationship with Paul. This tension may have led Paul to develop a grudge against Sandra, who he and Tracy saw as an obstacle to their relationship. Paul's friend, Zwickle, reported that on March 26, Paul returned home around 10 a.m. and immediately began packing his belongings. Paul mentioned that he was planning to leave with Tracy and that they had $2,000, which he believed would be sufficient for their escape. Paul confided in Zwickle that he and Tracy intended to run away in her car, and Zwickle assumed they were fleeing due to a disagreement. However, Paul did not mention Sandra's death to Zwickle. When Zwickau inquired about how Paul obtained the money, he claimed he had sold Sandra's tape recorder to a pawn shop. It was later discovered that tape recorder had indeed gone missing from the house after the attack. In reality, Paul was not being truthful. Selling tape recorder only netted him less than $50. It remained unclear how Paul could have acquired such a significant amount of money at that time. Afterwards, Zwickau noticed how Paul and Tracy got into a car and drove away without any signs of stress. It seemed they were heading to Mexico. Given the situation, Zwickau began to suspect that Paul might be involved in a murder. As a result, Paul and Tracy were placed on a nationwide wanted list. Investigators in Kansas identified 18-year-old Paul Nelson as the prime suspect. The police were particularly troubled by the $2,000 Paul had, which he used to flee. They wondered if he had robbed someone or committed another crime. Investigators were shocked and they examined Sandra's bank accounts. On March 26, her daughter, Tracy, withdrew money from her mother's account. While looking into this, detectives discovered that Tracy had gone to the bank with Paul and cashed a check with the teller. Tracy claimed that her mother had given her the money to buy a new car. This raised serious suspicions about her actions. A bank employee reported that Tracy and Paul were calm during the transaction and showed no signs of worry. Amid suspicions that Tracy may have been a hostage in a kidnapping, police now have new suspicions. It seemed Paul's friend, Zwickau, was telling the truth. Could Tracy actually be a willing participant in the crime instead of a hostage? To investigate further, they reached out to Tracy's best friend, Candace Keno. Candace revealed that on March 25, Tracy had called her to share that a serious conflict had erupted with her mother. Tracy's mother had taken the car key away from her and threatened to kick her out. This created evident hostility between them. Candace mentioned that following this incident, Tracy decided to run away with Paul and admitted this during their phone conversation. The officers' doubts were confirmed. It became clear that from the very beginning, no one had actually tried to keep Tracy as a hostage. The police confirmed that Tracy and Paul had crossed the border into Mexico and subsequently got lost. After some time, a United States Border Service officer informed the police that Tracy and Paul had re-entered the U.S. near El Paso. The reason for their return was unclear, but it was evident that they were in trouble. Efforts to locate the couple intensified. On April 8, Candace contacted investigators to report that she had spoken with Tracy on the phone. Candace provided the police with Tracy's phone number. Tracy and Paul was located on the outskirts of El Paso, and later, that day, investigators apprehended Paul. Candace agreed to make another call to help detectives pinpoint the location from which Tracy had called. Tracy and Paul was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. Paul did not appear to be a dangerous gangster. He kept his eyes on the floor and trembled with fear. He explained the details of the attack, admitting that on the evening of the 25th, he had gone to the house Sandra's. Then, Tracy and Paul had devised an escape plan, and it was Tracy who proposed drastic measures. She wanted to kill her mother to prevent her from ever finding her. The next morning, Candace stopped by to pick up Tracy, and they left for school together. Meanwhile, Paul was hiding in the bedroom with a tree branch he intended to use as a weapon. He claimed he found it in the house and did not plan to kill Sandra. He only wanted to strike her so she would lose consciousness. However, the police were skeptical of his explanation. They questioned why he would sneak into the house and attack her if he didn't intend to kill her, knowing she could eventually regain consciousness and report him. It seemed clear to the investigators that his intention was murder, which would allow him to escape without being caught. Paul continued his story. He claimed that Sandra surprised him by opening the door and immediately began yelling and insulting him. In a fit of anger, he wrapped a cord around Sandra's neck and strangled her until she stopped breathing. Afterward, he covered she with a blanket and fled the scene. Meanwhile, Tracy, smiling, testified in the next room. Their accounts were similar, except for how much blame they placed on each other. Tracy asserted that she did not act alone. She claimed that she and Paul planned the murder together, but only Paul killed her mother. Tracy insisted that she had no role in the crime. She also revealed that the wooden figurine used in the murder was hidden in the backyard. The police later found the figurine there, along with Sandra's blood on it. The prosecutor's office was prepared to charge Tracy and Paul with first-degree murder. According to state law, the maximum penalty for this crime was life imprisonment. Paul's defense argued that he acted under Tracy's influence, claiming he should be guilty of manslaughter instead. Conversely, Tracy's lawyer argued that Paul was the instigator, as he was the one who strangled Sandra, while Tracy played a secondary role. The trial began on February 26, 1999, with both defense teams trying to downplay their clients' involvement in the horrific crime to lessen their possible sentences. During the trial, the young defendants, Tracy and Paul, displayed disrespectful behavior and laughed provocatively. Tracy refused to meet with her family, even though they wanted to discuss her involvement in Sandra's murder. Her brother, Chad, particularly wished to speak with her. On April 22, 1999, the court sentenced Tracy Miles and Paul Nelson to life in prison, with a minimum of 25 years before they can apply for parole. After the judge announced the sentence, Paul made an obscene gesture. Both Tracy and Paul expressed dissatisfaction with the verdict and showed no signs of remorse for their actions. In the future, Tracy and Paul will have the chance to request early release, but Sandra's relatives hope that this does not occur. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Dickinson family. From the outside, the Dickinson family appeared perfect. They had everything needed for happiness: a loving mother and a devoted father who was willing to do anything for his family's well-being. Although they lived together in a small unit, they harbored many dark secrets that would surprise an outsider. For years, the Dickinson family faced deep-rooted issues that ultimately resulted in brutal murders. This tragic event took place in September 2021. One significant factor that contributed to this horrific outcome was depression, which can be devastating. Today, we will share one of the most heartbreaking stories from the criminal world. Lauren Dickinson, who lived in South Africa. She had a difficult childhood that made it hard for her to connect with teachers and other children. As a result, she often felt isolated and was frequently excluded from holidays and birthday celebrations. This experience contributed to mental health issues that began during her teenage years. Lauren is very anxious and struggles to control her emotions, always seeing threats in everyday situations. Despite her difficulties, she has had a passion for medicine since she was a child. After finishing school, she went to university and eventually became a general practitioner. In the following years, while working, Lauren met Graham, an orthopedic doctor, and they began dating. Despite their different medical specializations, they quickly developed a close bond and fell in love. Graham was outgoing and sociable, which complemented Lauren's more reserved nature. Their relationship seemed harmonious as they balanced each other's weaknesses. With Graham's influence, Lauren became more cheerful and open. They got married in May 2006. At that time, they lived in Pretoria, South Africa, where they built a house on nearly a hectare of land. The house had 4 bedrooms, a gym, a swimming pool. As they started their married life, Lauren shifted her career focus to gynecology and neurological diseases. However, almost from the beginning of her attempts to get pregnant, she decided to put her career on hold to have children. In 2012, Lauren returned to work at the medical center, but she was no longer a practicing physician. Instead, she became a part-time manager and her husband's assistant. The couple faced challenges conceiving due to health issues. Despite these difficulties, they were eager to have children. In 2013, they sought help from fertility specialists. After successful treatment, they welcomed a baby girl named Sarah, but she was born prematurely at 18 weeks. Sadly, Sarah did not survive. The loss was a shock to Lauren, who grieved every day for the next 2 months. The couple continued to consult with fertility specialists but continued to face challenges conceiving. Lauren underwent 17 rounds of IVF, often with low success rates. They eventually decided to use donor eggs, and their first daughter, Leanne, was born. The family was very anxious during the pregnancy. Lauren feared another negative outcome and the possibility of losing the baby again. After Leanne was born, Lauren suffered from mental health issues. In 2015, doctors diagnosed her with anxiety, postpartum depression, and major depressive disorder when Leanne was just 18 months old. In response to the situation, Graham took a leave of absence to care for their daughter, and other family members stepped in to help. Following the doctor's advice, Lauren managed her illness with medication. Despite the challenges, the couple remained hopeful about having a second child, and after a few years, Lauren became pregnant again. An ultrasound revealed that she was expecting twins, which excited the parents as their family was set to grow. However, during the examination, they learned that one of the girls had a cleft palate, which caused Lauren significant anxiety. Fortunately, it was later discovered that the condition was not as serious as initially thought, which brought relief to Lauren's family. In 2018, twins Maya and Carla were born earlier than expected when they were in their 5th month. A successful surgery to correct the birth defect was performed. The family handled the ordeal well. After the surgery, Lauren and Graham decided to hire a nanny to help care for the family. The issues surrounding the birth left Lauren feeling anxious and compounded by panic attacks. Her husband Graham described her as an extremely anxious mother, constantly worrying about their children. Lauren was overprotective, often watching their every move, which irritated the kids. Despite these challenges, they managed to overcome many of the difficulties. The Dickinson family was relatively well off, allowing them to hire a maid, gardener, and nanny to help ease the stress on Lauren, who struggled with her mental health. By 2020, the Dickinson family had sold their house and land and moved abroad. They chose to rent a comfortable apartment. This new living situation has significantly improved their family relationships. For the first time in 10 years, Lauren stopped taking antidepressants. By March 2021, she was off all medications and had good mental health. This positive change inspired her to start doing CrossFit at least 3 times a week to stay in shape. In addition, she overcame her eating disorder. This change gave her a more positive outlook on life. Graham noticed positive changes in Lauren and was relieved that she seemed to have overcome her previous health problems. However, their happiness did not last long. By June 2021, Lauren's depression had returned. As a result, Lauren decided to see her psychiatrist again, who prescribed her antidepressants after she described feeling depressed and isolated. The Dickinson family was in a difficult situation. Graham was often home because he did not work, and the children became very attached to him, always wanting him around. As a result, Lauren felt left out, and she often argued with her children, who preferred to be with their father. Although they appeared to be a happy family on the surface, things were actually very tense and could explode at any moment. In July 2021, South Africa experienced a series of riots that heightened Lauren's anxiety. The violent protests triggered panic within her family, prompting them to quickly decide to move to New Zealand, which they saw as a quieter and safer place. This move was also strategic, as Graham's parents lived there. However, their hopes were met with numerous challenges. Immigrating under such circumstances carried the risk of being denied a residence permit due to chronic illness or health conditions. To hide her struggles from the authorities, Lauren stopped taking her antidepressants shortly before the move. Her psychiatrist had told her that she was stable and no longer needed medication. Nevertheless, the pressure of the immigration process caused Lauren significant stress, worsened by her insomnia. She was only getting 2 hours of sleep each night because of the increased workload. Before the move, she began taking another medication in August 2021. The Dickinson family left South Africa on August 2nd. Lauren later described the trip as one of the most difficult times of her life, filled with anxiety about their future in New Zealand. Upon arriving in New Zealand, they settled in Timaru, a quiet town of about 30,000. The family's struggles continued. Their living conditions in New Zealand were not much better than in South Africa, with frequent power outages. In addition, Graham had to return to work earlier than expected, adding to the Dickinson family's stress. Graham started working at a hospital in Timaru and started his shift. Lauren hoped that they would have more time to deal with the challenges of moving house and adjusting to a new. Lauren felt overwhelmed with family issues and was left to care for 3 young children on her own without any support. On the appointed day, the Dickinson family went to the immigration office and were selected as potential citizens, while many other families faced rejection. Their application was accepted and they were told to wait for a response. The couple then went to a local Christian school to enroll their child in kindergarten. Graham noticed that during this time, Lauren seemed particularly sad, as if a dark cloud was hanging over her. She seemed far from the cheerful person who shared her life on social media. Even the smallest setback would send her spiraling deeper into depression. During this challenging period, Lauren kept in touch with her new friend Letitia through social media. She attempted to call Letitia, who had recently moved, to invite her to dinner, but her messages went unanswered. Meanwhile, Lauren and her spouse were looking for a rental property, but all the houses within their budget were in poor condition. They were temporarily staying in a house provided by the hospital, which only added to Lauren's stress as she was already feeling overwhelmed. However, on the night of September 14, 2021, Lauren had trouble sleeping. The next day, she had to take Maya and Carla to kindergarten and take Leanne to school. The morning was lively as the children, excited about their early rise and packing, chose their outfits without noticing their Lauren's fatigue. After dropping them off at school, Lauren returned home and lay down to rest. At 10:47 a.m., she received a photo from her kindergarten teacher showing her twins eating lunch at their table. Then Lauren cleaned the house, organizing her belongings because her family had just moved here. After running errands all day, Lauren picked up the girls from daycare and school around 3 p.m. and took them to the playground. Later, at home, Carla threw a tantrum because she missed their dad, who was at work. The other twin, Maya, had recently fallen out of bed and hurt her stitches. The girls cried so much that Lauren felt like a bad mother, trying to comfort them when they ignored her attempts to comfort them. Lauren cooked chicken nuggets for the children, but they were not satisfied with the meal. This led to a breaking point for her. Feeling overwhelmed, Lauren bathed the children and put them to bed around 6 p.m. Although she received several messages from friends in South Africa, she did not have time to reply to all of them. Graham returned home from work, had a quick dinner, and then left for an important meeting at 7 p.m. While he was away, chaos erupted in the house. About 20 minutes after he left, the children began to scream. In an attempt to calm them down, Lauren went to the garage to get some zip ties. Lauren told the children they were going to weave a necklace and placed the zip ties around their necks. No idea what was going on and were happily playing along. However, Leanne was angry with her mother and criticized what she was doing. For Leanne, it was not a game. In a fit of rage, Lauren began suffocating her children with pillows and blankets. She said that she was very sick and would soon die, and that she was killing her children because she was afraid that no one would take care of them. After Lauren believed the children were dead, she attempted to end your life. Lauren cut herself with a knife, but the blade was too dull to cut deeply. Ultimately, she resorted to pills, consuming several large doses of various medications. But these were not enough to end her life. In a moment of confusion, Lauren collapsed on the kitchen floor, lost in her thoughts about her actions. At that moment, Graham came home. He noticed something was wrong with her and asked if she was okay, but she responded in a way he couldn't understand. Sensing something was very wrong, he rushed upstairs to check on the kids. Going up to the room, he hoped everything was okay, but instead, he found the lifeless bodies of his children on the bed. The horrifying reality unfolded before his eyes. In desperation, he sought help. With the help of colleagues at a nearby hospital, he ran out into the street to meet one of them. As he closed the door behind him, the last thing he saw was Lauren lying on the floor with her eyes closed. He didn't know if she was alive, his only concern was his daughters. So he didn't check on Lauren. A friend at the hospital tried to revive the children, but their efforts were in vain. Around 9:40 p.m., neighbors heard a loud noise, which turned out to be a door slamming as Graham rushed outside. Soon after, they heard sobbing and screaming coming from the house. Graham approached the house and admitted that everything was his fault. He was distressed about leaving the children with their mother, who was not mentally stable. Neighbors called emergency services, and the police and ambulance arrived around 10 p.m. Officers discovered the bodies of the murdered children in the house. The twins, Maya and Carla, aged 2, and their 6-year-old, Leanne, had been killed. In the kitchen, police found Lauren alive and conscious. She answered their questions but spoke very softly. The Lauren appeared to be in shock. The police discovered shallow cuts on her hands and forearms. When asked if she had used any illegal drugs that evening, she denied it. Later, police found 9 medication bottles in her trash, along with a package containing hundreds of cable ties. A toxicological examination revealed that her blood did not contain any illegal drugs or alcohol, but it did show high levels of antidepressants, sedatives, and other medications. 40-year-old Lauren was promptly arrested and taken to the hospital for help. The brutal murders of the Dickinson family shocked the local community and then spread throughout New Zealand and South Africa. The nanny who worked for the family was speechless when she heard the news. She struggled to accept that it was true. In an interview, the nanny described Lauren, Graham, and their children as an ideal family, saying that she had never witnessed any arguments or conflicts within their household. The nanny firmly believed that Lauren loved her children deeply. She last saw the children in June 2021, when the Dickinson family was excited about moving to New Zealand. After Lauren was taken into custody, Graham had to return to South Africa because his visa was expiring in December 2021. He later returned to participate in the trial. He communicated with Lauren and found it hard to believe that she had harmed the children. The day after her arrest, Lauren woke up in the hospital. She was in disbelief about her situation and was even more shocked, and the police entered her room and accused her of killing 3 girls. On September 18th, Lauren Dickinson was officially charged with triple murder. Lauren admitted to the crime but stated that she did not want to harm her children. She explained that her actions stemmed from her mental instability and the overwhelming challenges she faced as a mother. Lauren expressed feelings of inadequacy in her parenting, struggling to manage her children, who were often screaming. Eventually, the stress became unbearable for her. She recounted how she killed her children, first Carla, then Leanne, and finally Maya, using pillows and blankets to suffocate them. Although Lauren denied experiencing auditory or visual hallucinations, her lawyer requested a psychiatric evaluation following the preliminary court hearing. During this time, Lauren refused to eat and lost weight, dropping to 47 kilograms. Her physical and mental health issues delayed the case for a month, leading to the rescheduling of the hearing for July 2023, nearly 2 years after the tragic events. In court, Lauren's lawyers sought to focus on her mental health struggles as part of their defense strategy. New Zealand law is very lenient towards those who commit crimes against children, especially in cases of manslaughter, where the offender can receive a suspended sentence. It was important for the defense to show that Lauren's actions were a response to extreme stress, showing that she considered killing her child a form of self-defense. The trial began on July 17, 2023, and lasted 4 weeks. Attorneys have said that Lauren had suffered from years of health problems and struggled with depression. Her mental health struggles led her to consider killing her daughter as a way to deliverance. Tensions had recently escalated between Lauren and her children. They often disobeyed her, which led her to resort to physical punishment and consider sedatives. During the trial, Graham revealed that Lauren had raised concerns about the children's safety on 3 separate occasions, but he had not taken them seriously. Each time he left the house, he felt remorse. In May 2019, Lauren expressed a desire to smother their daughters with pillows. In July 2011, she mentioned wanting to cut their femoral arteries in the bathroom. Despite these alarming statements, they were not considered serious at the time. Lauren has a hard time managing her spoiled twins, expressing her frustration by saying, "Children drive she crazy. They are wild, brazen, and disobedient. She tired of them. She wish I could start over and make different choices." Lauren had to face many difficulties to become a parent, making it difficult for others to believe that she could hurt the children. During the trial, Graham described her difficulties in raising her children. He rarely saw her show affection to her children, and they did not seem to seek her out. This became especially evident when he was home more often and the children clung to him, leaving Lauren without the opportunity to play with them. He sensed something was wrong, but attributed it to her withdrawn personality and inability to participate in fun activities. Graham mentioned that New Zealand did not meet Lauren's expectations. The new country felt completely different from what she had envisioned. This led to a significant cultural shock from everything she encountered. Graham expressed forgiveness towards his wife, believing she was overwhelmed by the challenges she faced. He urged others to forgive her and pray for Lauren. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office aimed to demonstrate that the triple murder was premeditated. They presented evidence showing that the actions were methodical and intentional, including search engine queries. Lauren had repeatedly searched for lethal doses of various medications for children and methods of strangulation. Additionally, she had confided her disturbing plans to family members on several occasions. The prosecutor argued that Lauren was frustrated and angry with her children because she felt unable to manage them and was resentful towards them, believing that the girls negatively impacted her relationship with her husband. Psychiatrists confirmed that Lauren was likely in an unstable mental state at the time of the crime. Experts noted that Lauren was experiencing significant anxiety during this period. On August 14, 2013, the jury began reviewing the evidence in the case, which included hundreds of pages of research reports and documents from police and experts. After initial deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a consensus on Lauren's guilt. They returned to the office to review detailed police footage of the victim's parents, which took more than 15 hours and lasted 2 days. On August 16, after a hearing at Christchurch, Lauren's attorney, and Tui, said the best place for Lauren to serve her sentence was in hospital, a placement that all 3 mental health professionals who evaluated her agreed with. Lauren Dickinson will be detained at hospital pending assessment before a sentencing date is finalized. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Emma Jangestig. Arboga, a small town in Sweden about 160 kilometers west of Stockholm, experienced a crime in 2008 that remains one of the most shocking in the country. On March 17, 2008, a 20-year-old mother of two, Emma Janestake, was spending the evening with her children. Her eldest, Max, was 3 years old, and her youngest, Saga, was 1.5. Emma was preparing dinner while waiting for her fiancé, Torg Hellberg, who was still at work and expected to return in a few hours. Emma had been divorced for a year when she met Torg. They quickly developed a relationship and moved in together. The couple bought a house. This move took place just 2 months before the tragedy. Although Torg was not the biological father of Emma's children, he cared for them as if they were his own. It seemed that Emma had found the perfect partner to build a complete family and raise her children. Nicholas, the biological father of Max and Saga, maintained contact with the kids. He had a reserved relationship with his ex-wife, Emma, but spoke with the children almost every day. Around 6 p.m., Emma and the children sat down for dinner. Torg couldn't join them this time because he was working late, but he said he would be home soon. While waiting, Emma decided to use the time to message her family and friends. She used a messaging app to chat with her sister, and their conversation continued smoothly until her sister received the last message at 19:07. Suddenly, their dialogue stopped abruptly in the middle of a sentence. Emma didn't read more messages or respond, which seemed odd. Her sister found this strange, so she contacted Torg and expressed her concern about Emma's unusual behavior and lack of response. As it turned out, Torg was free earlier than expected and was already walking home. He assured Emma's sister that he would check on the situation. Torg arrived at the house at 19:17. Everything seemed normal from the outside. But he noticed the front door was open, which was unusual since it was usually locked. Sensing something was wrong, Torg cautiously entered the house and was met with a shocking sight. The corridor was in complete disarray, items were scattered on the floor, and some pieces of furniture were broken. Initially, he couldn't understand what had happened and thought it might be a children's game that had gotten out of hand. However, he soon realized that the extent of the chaos was too severe for children to have caused it, and Emma would not have allowed it. He called out to all the household members by name several times, but there was no response. Suddenly, at the end of the hallway, Torg noticed a suspicious figure on the floor. As he approached, he was horrified. He saw a small body lying in an unusual position with many cuts on its face and head. Emma lay next to it, her body covered in blood. Realizing he needed to act quickly, Torg called the police at 7:20 p.m. The police received the call from Torg, a distressed man who was desperately calling for help. He explained that someone had attacked his family while he was away. In the background, a woman's moans could be heard. The police quickly dispatched police and ambulance services to the location. Doctors arrived within minutes. By then, Torg had discovered that all 3 family members had suffered severe head injuries, so severe that they were unrecognizable. To their surprise, doctors discovered that all of the victims were still alive and breathing. Everyone was immediately taken to the hospital for emergency care. Max and Saga were in critical condition, while Emma's injuries were slightly less severe. Her was placed in intensive care and put into a medically induced coma. Doctors predicted from the start that even if the children and mother survived, the brain injuries they suffered would likely have long-term effects on their lives. Doctors battled to save the victims. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the scene of the horrific attack, which looked like a scene from a horror movie. The area was cordoned off for a thorough examination due to the severe chaos inside the house. Unfortunately, the medical team left many traces while providing aid and transporting the victims, which led to displaced objects and lost evidence. The attack clearly happened within a 13-minute window between 19:07, when Emma's sister received her last message, and Torg's emergency call at 19:20. Initially, Torg, the head of the family, was suspected. However, he had a solid alibi as surveillance cameras had captured him on his way home, thus eliminating him from the suspect list. With the time intervals clarified, it became clear that he was telling the truth. This indicated that the attacker had only a 10-minute window between 1907 and 1917 when Torg entered the house and found the wounded family members. Although Torg was no longer a suspect, the police decided to speak with him again at the station. They assumed he might have seen or heard something important for the investigation. However, he insisted that he did not see any strangers or cars. The only thing that seemed suspicious to him was the unlocked door of the house. Police then suspected Emma's ex-husband Nicholas as a potential suspect. Torg explained that Nicholas had constant conflicts with Emma over communication about the children, division of assets and alimony. These issues escalated at times, and she even went to the police because she feared for her safety. However, this was long before the tragedy. Eventually, they reached an agreement and everything was resolved. The police are working hard at the crime scene to gather more information. The perpetrator could be someone close to Emma. Looking at the level of attacks on the victims, it seems that there was a personal motive. Whoever this person was, they harbored a deep hatred for the victims, lost control during the killing process, and caused many injuries. At the time, Emma's ex-husband Nicholas was the prime suspect. Due to previous conflicts with Emma, he even threatened her, prompting her to contact the police. He was later arrested and questioned. Nicholas was shocked by the incident but calmly answered police questions. He had an alibi for the time of the attack, as he was in another city. Although the alibi has not been verified, his behavior suggests that he is not the killer. The police's only hope is 3-year-old Saga, who is still fighting for her life in hospital. If she survives, she could be the police's only witness, providing vital information about who the killer is. The victim's family fear the attacker may return to harm Saga again. To protect her, 24-hour security has been deployed to the hospital. She is in critical condition and doctors believe that even if she survives, she may be permanently disabled and might not remember the attack. No other witnesses to the attack could be found. The neighbors neither saw nor heard anything, so the police started reviewing the surveillance cameras in the area. They hoped to track the attacker and determine his origin. It was also crucial to find the murder weapon, which might have traces of the criminal. Therefore, patrol officers carefully examined the area and even used search dogs, but unfortunately, this yielded no results. Forensic experts found that the children had been attacked with a heavy object, such as a hammer or similar tool. The children had been hit with such force that their skulls had been fractured. Each child had been hit multiple times, indicating the intensity of the attacker's rage. This behavior was an important clue. However, it is not possible to identify anyone capable of doing so. The young family had no connections to the criminal world and no enemies. They were known to be good people. The police quickly confirmed their suspicions of a personal motive, as nothing was stolen from the crime scene. Valuables and money were still present, indicating it wasn't a robbery. The forensic examination of the house concluded the day after the murder. By then, Nicholas was removed from the list of suspects because his alibi was verified, and he was released. Emma is still in a coma and the investigation is making no progress. The case attracted considerable media attention. The area had a low crime rate, and the choice of victims and the level of cruelty were shocking. Police contacted local people through the media, which aroused the interest of those living near Emma's house. A passerby reported seeing a man dressed in black with a hood standing hesitantly in the doorway of the house at around 7 p.m. About 5 to 10 minutes later, the same witness, returning from the shop, saw a suspiciously frail man dressed in black run out of the house, get into a car and drive away immediately. He did not get a good look at the person and could not describe the car, but he thought the driver might be a woman disguised as a man. Several other witnesses later gave similar descriptions of a man in the area. It was clear that the man dressed in black was the suspect before the attack. A man then went to the police and reported his ex-girlfriend, expressing concern about her recent inappropriate behavior. She was identified as Christina Scherer, 31, born in Hanover, Germany. When she was 11, her father left the family and they had limited contact after that. Christina then moved to New York and lived with relatives in Manhattan. After returning to Germany, Christina settled in Göttingen, where for the next 6 years she studied history. She then went to Greece and participated in RASP. While in Athens, she worked at a hotel and as a historian. Later, she moved to Crete and worked in another hotel. In August 2006, Torg, a 20-year-old trader, vacationed on Crete and stayed at Christina's hotel. On his first day there, he met Christina, and they began a romance. They spent 5 days together on his vacation and continued to correspond after he left. Christina later visited him in Sweden, where they spent several days together. After her visit, she suggested going skiing, but he was not interested. Torg admitted that during this time, he noticed that Christina seemed very different than when she was on vacation, and he felt suspicious about their relationship. In January, he told Christina that their relationship was over, but she couldn't accept it calmly and tried everything to fix it. She kept messaging him, urging him to reconsider and get back together. In March 2007, she visited Sweden for 2 weeks and convinced Torg to have dinner with her. He agreed, but during the meeting, he made it clear that they could only be friends. Christina accepted this and left, but after some time, she returned to Sweden again, insisting on a new meeting, considering that this should be the last dinner together at which they would clear things up. During this meeting, she suggested giving their relationship another chance, but Torg firmly refused, as he believed the matter was settled. The Christina informed the Torg that, since they would no longer be in a relationship, she wanted to visit him to collect some items she forgot during a previous visit. Torg agreed to her request. After a brief visit, Christina left. However, the next day, she called again asking for help because she got lost near a castle. The Torg went to find her, and when he did, she admitted that she had taken a large dose of drugs the previous night, intending to end her life due to their breakup. Feeling compassionate, Torg allowed her to stay the night. He contacted her family in Germany to express concern over Christina's situation, informing them about her mental health issues and suggesting they admit her to a psychiatric hospital. Torg was confident that she needed help and hoped treatment would resolve her obsessive behavior. Additionally, he felt she would be far enough away not to disturb him anymore. Her family arranged for her to stay in a psychiatric clinic for 3 weeks. Unfortunately, even this did not stop her. In the summer of 2007, she moved to Stockholm with the intention of staying long-term. Christina rented a house and began looking for work. It was later discovered that in January 2008, she went to Germany but returned on February 20th. After her return, she wrote to Torg, saying that she had given birth to his son. Christina also revealed that she had given the child up for adoption due to her mental health problems. This caused confusion for Torg, as he did not know about her pregnancy. Christina mentioned that she had just gone on a business trip to Germany and that their child might have a genetic blood disease. She said that if the doctor's answer was confirmed, the adoptive parents would contact Torg to discuss the matter. Torg was confused by this. At the time, he was in a serious relationship with Emma and they lived together with her children. In January 2008, they moved into a new house. Emma knew about Christina's problems and the story of her son. Emma was skeptical and asked in question, which hospital was the child born in? She wanted to verify this information to avoid any problems, but Christina could not answer. It seemed that she was lying. After some time, Tord received the call from a stranger claiming to be the adoptive father of Christina's son. He confirmed what Christina had said and confirmed that Tord was the biological father of the child. The entire situation seemed unbelievable. It appeared that someone Christina knew had contacted Tord at her request, trying to manipulate the situation. At this point, Tord and Emma both believed the story of the child to be a fabrication. Christina could not provide any evidence of her son's existence. Police began investigating the possibility that Christina had been involved in the murder of Emma and her 2 children. She had been near Emma's home on the day of the murder before quickly leaving for Germany. To solve these problems, cooperation between the Swedish and German police was needed. On March 20th, a warrant was issued for Christina's arrest. The media quickly reported that Christina had been found in Hanover. Upon hearing the news, her mother and brother contacted the police, asking why Christina was a suspect. The police explained their suspicions of her involvement in a violent attack, which shocked her mother. Christina then called the police herself, claiming it was a misunderstanding and denying any involvement. However, she was arrested after speaking with the police. Christina requested an attorney, and her attorney found an error in the arrest warrant, which led to her release. However, Christina was rearrested 24 hours later. Throughout her interrogation, Christina maintained her innocence. When police searched her rented apartment, they confiscated her cell phone, laptop, and the clothing she was believed to have been wearing on the day of the murder. Christina claimed she was wearing a beige jacket, but witnesses said they saw her wearing a black jacket. The black jacket found during the search was clean and bloodless, suggesting it may have been a different item of clothing. The key evidence was found in search queries on Christina's laptop, which had many photos of Emma and her children and a blueprint of their home. This showed that Christina was planning the crime. Just before the attack, she looked up ways to hide evidence of a crime. She also repeatedly checked Tord's social media pages, demonstrating her intense obsession with him, along with diary entries detailing her victims, including their addresses and habits. On March 27th, Emma emerged from her coma. She was recognizable, much to the relief of her family. Police prepared for a crucial interview when Emma was able to communicate clearly, taking care not to mention her children to protect her mental state and ensure accurate responses. On April 1st, just 3 days after waking from her coma, Emma had her first meeting with the police. Despite her efforts to remember, she did not understand the police's questions or why she was in the hospital. Doctors hoped that her memory would improve over time. Emma asked more and more about her children. After her first interview, a doctor briefed her about the attack but did not go into detail. However, by the next morning, Emma had forgotten the conversation, a situation that lasted for weeks. Because of her fragile condition, officials chose to provide only vague answers about her children and prevented her from accessing newspapers or TV. This restriction frustrated her further, as she couldn't understand the situation. She continued to believe her children were alive, despite her initial memory lapses. Finally, after a conversation with a doctor, she realized that she would never see her children again, but she still could not remember what had happened. She believed that she had been in a serious accident. At this time, forensic experts did not find any of Christina's DNA or fingerprints in Emma's house. It is possible that Christina's attempt to stage the murder was successful. Additionally, they were unable to find a murder weapon. In March, Christina's roommate reported to the police that a hammer had gone missing from her toolbox. The hammer matched the description of the murder weapon, indirectly linking Christina to the crime. However, without strong evidence to charge, the investigation continued. Police focused on shoe prints found at the scene of the children's murders. Several other footprints, belonging to the paramedics, the 3 victims, and Tord, were not involved and were discarded. However, police did identify prints from sneakers not worn by family members or police. They identified the brand, style, and size that Christina had worn. A photo on her personal page showed her wearing the same pair of sneakers, in the same size, but this evidence remained circumstantial. Video surveillance recordings from the railway station provided significant evidence, showing that Christina, wearing her jacket, visited the city at least 3 times in the week before the attack. Her last visit was on the day of the murder, March 17th. Although the images were unclear, her identity was confirmed through mobile phone geolocation. When questioned, Christina could not clearly explain her presence in the city. She later stated that she was there for work. Police were able to determine the motive for the attack when they found notes on Christina's computer that revealed her intense jealousy of Emma, as Christina struggled to accept that Tord had found happiness with someone else. A psychological examination determined that Christina was sane. The police continued to make every effort to help the Emma, who miraculously survived, regain her memory. They even accompanied her to the crime scene, but this did not assist. Then, a few days later, there was an unexpected breakthrough. Emma suddenly recalled that on the evening of March 17th, someone had knocked on the door. The Emma opened it to find a girl in dark clothes and a hood standing there. The stranger introduced herself as Christina and immediately struck Emma on the head with a heavy object. It is frightening to think about what happened next in the house and what the defenseless children went through. On July 29, 2008, Christina Scherer appeared in court in Sweden, charged with double murder and attempted murder. Her defense team remained hopeful, considering the evidence against her circumstantial and easily dismissed. However, Christina's strange behavior complicated matters. She waved and smiled inappropriately at those present in court, behavior that supported the prosecutor's portrayal of her as cruel. Christina said her visit to the city was for work. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that she had come to the city with the intention of killing. They claimed that she had been there twice before, on March 12th and 14th, to check out her targets. Furthermore, they portrayed Christina as a pathological liar obsessed with her ex-partner. There was no evidence that she had ever been pregnant or had children. No witnesses saw her pregnant, and there were no maternity records showing that she had given birth or adopted a child. This undermined her claim of having children, casting doubt on her credibility. The key witness for the prosecution was Emma, who identified Christina on the first day of the hearing. She recalled that about 10 minutes before returning from work, she opened the door and encountered the person who had killed her children. Emma was so shocked to see the killer that she fainted in the courtroom. This incident was significant because it confirmed that Emma had not been exposed to any information about the suspect or the crime prior to that moment, which strengthened the prosecution's case. The defense focused on the fact that all the evidence against Christina was circumstantial. They pointed out that the murder weapon didn't have her fingerprints, and there was no DNA evidence linking her to the crime. The prosecutors highlighted blurry surveillance footage and a sneaker print, suggesting that doctors may have inadvertently destroyed important evidence. Additionally, one witness recalled seeing Christina near the crime scene, which supported her presence close to Emma's house, where another witness identified the attacker. Christina could not explain her internet searches in relation to the evidence cover-up, nor why she had photos of Emma and the children, along with a diagram of Emma's house. On August 26, the jury found Christina Scherer guilty of double murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In addition, the court ordered her to pay Emma 100,000 crowns, or about $10,000. Christina's attorney immediately appealed the decision, but the appeal was denied. It is expected that if Christina is ever released from prison, she will be deported to Germany and permanently barred from returning to Sweden. In 2012, she was transferred to a women's prison in Fay, Germany, at her request. She continues to seek to overturn the court's decision and insists on her innocence, attempting to obtain a new trial. Emma is still dealing with the physical and mental effects of her injuries. Throughout this time, Torg has been a strong support, and they eventually married. They later had 2 children together. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Assunta Botera. Rosario Porto and her husband, Alfonso Botera, were wealthy individuals. Rosario's father served as an influential French consul, and her mother was an art teacher. Rosario followed in his father's footsteps. She became a successful lawyer. In 1997, she was appointed French consul. She inherited this post from her father. Alfonso was a well-known journalist. He and Rosario married in 1996, and they moved to a large apartment in an upscale area of Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Rosario had lupus erythematosus, which led doctors to advise against pregnancy. They decided to adopt a child abandoned by his parents and create a loving home for him. Adoption was challenging in Spain, so when they were in their early 30s, they chose to go to China for adoption. After navigating numerous bureaucratic hurdles, they arrived at an orphanage. Rosario immediately noticed a 9-month-old girl, and within 2 weeks, they resolved all issues to officially adopt her. When returning to Spain, the child's documents named her Assunta Fon Yan. This was notable since Assunta was among the first Chinese children adopted in the area. Initially, it seemed fortunate for her to join a respected and wealthy family, but unfortunately, this joy did not last long. Assunta was a highly capable girl. She excelled academically, studied multiple languages, practiced ballet, and attended music school. It seems that Rosario and Alfonso want to give her every opportunity to develop. On July 4, 2013, Rosario and her 12-year-old daughter, Assunta, went to the beach to cool off on a hot day. Assunta told a terrifying story about a man wearing a black mask and gloves who tried to strangle her the night before. The longer the girl talked, the more she lost control, and finally, her mother cried. She knew about it, she was there when it happened, but for some reason she did not contact the police. On the night of September 21, 2013, at 10:30 p.m., Rosario and Alfonso were at the police station for another reason. They reported their daughter, Assunta, was missing for several hours. Then, Rosario recounted Assunta's story of the attempted attack from 2.5 months prior. This left them fearful that the attacker had returned and something terrible might have happened to their daughter. They were terrified she had been kidnapped. Alfonso was convinced she was no longer alive. They urgently pleaded with the police to take immediate action. In the early hours of September 22, 2 men were driving through a forest on their way back from a bar. Suddenly, the driver stopped, saying he noticed something unusual in the forest. He didn't understand what was going on, so he turned his headlights toward the forest and mentioned to his friend that he felt like someone was watching them. Despite this, he wasn't scared, likely due to the alcohol he had consumed, so he got out of the car and walked a few steps into the forest. In the light of the car's headlights, he saw something on the ground that looked like a doll. As he approached, he realized it was a girl. She was tied up, and her clothes were dirty. He checked for a pulse and found that the girl was dead. Then, they quickly contacted the police. The police identified the body as Assunta, who had died just a week before her 13th birthday. While examining the area near her body, they discovered her mobile phone, which contained some disturbing photographs. There are several photos of she wrapped tightly, lying with her eyes wide open. Some forensic experts suggested her dilated pupils indicated possible drug use. Even more distressing were photos of the girl in revealing clothing, with bright makeup, fishnet stockings, and posing provocatively on a couch. Her eyes remained wide open, and her pupils were dilated. These photos later appeared on the internet, were widely circulated and making people angry about how a child was treated like that. Asunta's last day was described by her parents as ordinary. However, then little girl suddenly went missing and was found dead a few hours after they reported her disappearance. On that day, the girl went to visit her father, Alfonso, at his work, and then hurried back home, so she not wanting to miss The Simpsons at about 7 p.m. After she returned home, Rosario, her mother, came back from work and saw her daughter in her room, where she had her books spread out on the floor for homework. Rosario didn't notice anything unusual and left to go to their country house, which was about half an hour away, to pick up bathing suits and other items for a planned beach outing the next day. Rosario returned around 9:30 p.m., and by then, Asunta was no longer in the apartment. Rosario became worried because little girl hadn't called or mentioned any plans to go out, which was unusual for her. Thinking maybe she had gone to see friends, Rosario started calling the girl's friends and Alfonso, but nobody had seen she. Rosario was the last person to see Asunta alive, making her one of the first individuals the detectives focused on, and she was questioned at the station. During her discussion with the police, Rosario recalled the incidents of July 4th, the night of the first attack. When they returned from the store that evening, Asunta closed the front door but left the key in the lock. Her mother didn't notice, and they went to bed. Around 3 a.m., Rosario was awakened by cries for help. Rosario rushed to her daughter's room and saw a large man pinning little girl to the floor, seemingly trying to strangle her. She attacked the intruder, but he was very strong and easily threw her against the wall. Fortunately, no one was harmed, and the attacker fled. Rosario described him as a strong, middle-aged man dressed in black, wearing a mask and gloves, so it is not possible to give a more detailed description. Asunta told her friend about what happened and even sent several photos showing red marks on her neck. Asunta's father, Alfonso, mentioned that little girl had struggled with depression for a long time and was taking medication prescribed by doctors. This was confirmed because Asunta talked to friends and shared her experiences. Recently, she had been speaking more positively about her situation, saying she felt much better. However, after Asunta was first attacked, Rosario did not investigate to find out what was happening to her daughter. She cited Asunta's fragile emotional state and said she feared contacting police would upset Asunta. This explanation was not very convincing. Over the years, Asunta had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital because she often expressed end-her-life thoughts. Besides, she is very tired because of the overload of knowledge at school and extra classes. The nanny also said that Rosario had recently become very frustrated with Asunta, as little girl was no longer meeting Rosario's expectations, and her academic performance had declined. She had become somewhat of a burden, prompting Rosario to consider sending her to study in Poland. However, Rosario did not mention this to the detectives, so they decided to investigate Rosario's immediately. They were particularly interested in the country house Rosario visited on the day Asunta disappeared. As it turned out, when detectives got there, they found Asunta's body lying just 4 kilometers away. Rosario appeared surprised to see them. She was furious. She quickly headed to the second floor, clearly trying to hide something. When a detective checked a nearby trash can, he found a piece of orange rope inside, identical to the one used to tie Asunta's hands and feet. There was also a black mask and gloves. All these items were collected for examination, but unfortunately, no fingerprints or DNA were found. The investigative committee conducted several autopsies. They did not measure the body temperature immediately, fearing it might compromise the evidence, so the exact time of death couldn't be determined. However, it was estimated that Asunta was killed around 8 p.m. The cause of death was suffocation. Her mouth and nose were covered with a soft object, likely a pillow, which prevented her from breathing, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. In addition, an autopsy determined that Assunta had taken at least 27 lorazepam pills on the day of her death, 9 times the normal amount for an adult. Hair tests revealed this was not the first occurrence. Little girl had overdoses 3 months before her death, starting when the attacker first breaks into the home. It's important to note that overdoses of this drug can cause amnesia and loss of muscle control. The drug was used to treat anxiety disorders and insomnia. The police discovered that Rosario used it to combat depression, but it was not prescribed for Assunta. No one could explain why Assunta took the drug. According to Rosario, the criminals gave Assunta medicine so she wouldn't remember the incident. Detectives conducted a review of CCTV footage in the area to track Assunta's movements that day. Around 2 p.m., she visited her father, Alfonso. At 5:21 p.m., she returned home, and at 5:28 p.m., Rosario returned home. At 6:20 p.m., a gas station camera recorded a green Mercedes belonging to Rosario. She admitted the car was moving towards a house in the country. It was clear that besides the driver, there was a girl in the car, identified as Assunta. They were heading in the direction where Assunta's body was later found. The new testimony completely contradicted Rosario's earlier statements, making she the primary suspect in the murder. Therefore, she was questioned again. Rosario's face showed fear and shame because she had let her adopted daughter go missing while she was responsible for taking care of the girl. Then, she offered a different version of events. According to her, they went out to get swimsuits together, but when they arrived at the country house, Assunta refused to enter with her. Assunta chose to stay in the car while Rosario took everything she needed and did some small work. However, this took longer than expected, and Assunta wanted to return home to do chores and rest. Rosario agreed and drove her daughter back. But she dropped her daughter off about a 20-minute walk from their apartment to avoid navigating the narrow streets. However, the police reviewed CCTV footage from the outskirts of Santiago but found no evidence of Rosario taking her daughter back home. They only saw footage of Rosario leaving her country house alone around 9 p.m. Her story is full of controversial and contradictory details. She appeared to look at the detectives with arrogance, displaying coldness and showing no regret over the loss of her child. She persistently insisted that the large man in black was involved in the incident. When the police interviewed the Botera family's neighbors, one mentioned hearing screams at night in July, when Assunta was first attacked. He also observed something unusual. Even though the attacker entered an area where dogs lived, the dogs were silent, indicating that the attacker was very familiar with them. All in all, everything seemed suspicious, making them even more suspicious that Rosario and Alfonso were involved in the murder of their adopted daughter. The police considered different theories about the first home invasion. Some thought it was fabricated by Rosario, while others suspected it was the parents' first attempt at murder. Few believed an outsider was involved. On September 24th, Rosario and Alfonso held a funeral, during which they behaved oddly, even taking a selfie in front of the coffin. Due to inconsistencies in her testimony, Rosario was arrested after the funeral. By then, detectives had discovered what might have been the motive behind the crime. Witnesses came forward with information about incident from 9 months prior to the tragedy, and this may have been the beginning of the bloody end. In January 2013, Rosario started a relationship with a realtor named Manuel Garcia, whom she hired to sell real estate. Manuel was married and made it clear he would not leave his family. He considers the relationship with Rosario to be nothing more than an affair. Rosario was fine with this, and their secret relationship continued. During this time, her relationship with her husband, Alfonso, quickly deteriorated. She finds Alfonso boring and considers him a failure who overestimates himself. She described him as insensitive, while her lover, Manuel, was the complete opposite. After Alfonso finds messages from Rosario's lover on his wife's phone, They divorced in February 2013. Rosario and her daughter Assunta continued living in the apartment. She maintained her business and visited a country house. Custody of the daughter, Assunta, was shared, and both parents have the right to see the little girl. After Assunta's parents divorced, she lived in both her father's and her mother's houses. Many observed that she was always close to her mother, while her relationship with her father was not as warm. However, her father made efforts to improve their relationship. He also repeatedly told his ex-wife Rosario that they would be forever tied together through their adopted daughter. Is it possible that because Rosario wants to completely cut off contact with her ex-husband, so she will cause the innocent child to leave forever? It is known that earlier in the summer, Rosario had to end her relationship with her lover, Manuel. Alfonso took advantage of the opportunity, he convincing Rosario to end her relationship with Manuel in exchange for his help with their daughter while she was in the hospital. And Rosario agreed to this request. However, it was revealed that on September 21st, Rosario broke her promise, she spending most of the day with Manuel and only returning home in the evening. This is very suspicious, because soon after, Assunta was killed. During the investigation, numerous assumptions were made, including one significant point emphasized by the defense. They argued that male DNA was found on the clothes Assunta's, indicating a man's involvement. While it was considered possible that the mother was not involved in the crime, this scenario was deemed unlikely. Police have stepped up their investigation, collecting documents for analysis, focusing on identifying male DNA on Assunta's body. Several options were considered during the investigation. At first, Alfonso was suspected, but then all attention turned to Manuel. However, he had an alibi and had no motive to harm Assunta, so he was quickly dismissed as a suspect. Surprisingly, the DNA was identified as belonging to a stranger named Ramra, a Colombian citizen who lived in Madrid, about a 6-hour drive from Santiago, where the incident occurred. This may seem strange. When questioned, Ramra fervently denied any connection to the case, claiming he had never been to Santiago and had no involvement in the murder. Indeed, Ramra had an alibi. He was having dinner at a restaurant in Madrid with his girlfriend and was captured on CCTV footage there. Why had Assunta been taking prescription drugs in the months leading up to the incident without any prescription? Further examinations revealed that only a portion of the DNA traces found belonged to Ramra. The lab staff suggested that the match could be due to poor quality samples or contamination. There were even suggestions that someone might have intentionally tampered with the sample's DNA to mislead the investigation. At this stage, many questions remained unanswered, and detectives considered even the most unlikely scenarios. Rosario and Alfonso seemed indifferent to what happened to their adopted daughter. Rosario was the last person to see Assunta alive, and the press speculated that she could have acted alone. Despite her fragile appearance, but investigators doubted she could physically manage Assunta's body. Using cell phone towers, police tried to determine the whereabouts of Rosario and Alfonso at the time of the incident. On that day, their phones were turned off. This makes the police even more suspicious of them. However, Rosario explained it was a coincidence, and their phones just run out of battery at the same time. They don't have any bad intentions. After talking to a local pharmacist, who was also a friend of Rosario's, they discovered that Rosario first contacted the pharmacist on July 5th. The day after an intruder broke into the house and attacked Assunta. After that, this drug lorazepam was purchased in large quantities by Rosario. Considering all the circumstances, the detectives decided to arrest Alfonso Botera. Some of Assunta's teachers had noticed unusual behavior in her. One day, Assunta attended her violin lesson with her father, Alfonso, and she seemed unable to control herself. Alfonso explained that his daughter was just under the influence of allergy medication. The teachers observed that she was usually very reserved and did not share her problems. The drowsiness incident occurred repeatedly, but the parents always had excuses, typically citing her health condition. The teacher was suspicious and distrustful of the girl's parents. When the police interviewed Asunta's teacher, she described Asunta's symptoms and behavior, which matched many side effects of the medication. 2 days before the tragedy, the last suspicious incident happened. On that day, Rosario informed the teacher that her daughter couldn't attend class due to a severe reaction to prescribed medications. After hearing this, the detectives were convinced that the adoptive parents knew about the medications and attempted to poison Asunta. Although Rosario and Alfonso were divorced, but Alfonso was determined to reconcile with she. In June 2013, 3 months before the tragedy, Rosario experienced a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized. During this time, Alfonso moved back in, feeling optimistic as his wish to reunite with his family seemed to be coming true. During this period, Rosario ended her relationship with her lover. Alfonso visited her in the hospital and cared for her after her discharge. It seemed like family matters were improving, but later it was revealed that she had lied, she continuing her affair and meeting her lover on the day of the murder. Given the new information, the investigation believes that Alfonso sought revenge. Perhaps he wanted to cause Rosario more pain than he had to endure from her betrayal. This could explain why the orange rope ended up in the trash at the country house. It was simply tossed there by Alfonso. However, why was Rosario so alarmed when the police arrived, and why did she immediately check the trash? She likely knew about these items and was an accomplice. The police have discovered a new clue. Whenever Alfonso was at home with Rosario and Asunta, the little girl be drugged with lorazepam. However, Alfonso refused to comment on this, claiming he was not guilty. After the arrest, Rosario's behavior was unstable, alternating between hysteria and depression. Meanwhile, Alfonso remained quiet and calm, he constantly trying to reassure Rosario's by saying they just needed to love and support each other, and that everything would soon be over. Despite his soothing words, the police noticed his cold demeanor. Eventually, the police found the storage media Alfonso used. It turned out that the hard drive on his laptop had been completely replaced. Experts discovered that over 500,000 photos and videos had been stored on it, likely compromising material. The police also found that he had an unhealthy interest in Asian girls on his social media page. Evidence showed he had dozens of interactions and correspondence with Asian girls, and according to investigators, the photos suggested these girls were minors. Additionally, he often showed interest in adult Asian women with very youthful appearances. Later, a woman who owned an escort agency approached the police. She confessed that Alfonso was a regular at her establishment, always requesting only Asian women and insisting they dress as schoolgirls. Even his wife was aware of this preference. Photos of the murdered Asunta in revealing clothes made the situation even more serious. The prosecutor focused on how the seemingly calm and quiet Alfonso had cruelly treated his adopted daughter Asunta. The charges suggested that Rosario and Alfonso were criminals covering for each other, with both involved Asunta's death. What could have motivated the crime? Rosario and Alfonso refused to cooperate with the investigation and wouldn't communicate without their lawyers. Later, on their attorney's advice, they completely stopped commenting on the tragedy. Forensic psychiatrists were crucial to the investigation. They analyzed Rosario and Alfonso's behavior and identified them as narcissists with personality disorders. It appeared they adopted Asunta to present a loving family image, pressured by Rosario's parents. Sadly, Asunta became a mere pawn for them, and once she was no longer needed, they first exploited her and then decided to eliminate her. A 15-year-old acquaintance of Asunta testified for the prosecution. Although Alfonso claimed he stayed home all day until the evening on the day of the murder, this was proven false. The girls saw him around 6 p.m. near Rosario's house, a fact later confirmed by camera footage. Alfonso was captured on camera at 9 p.m. after Assunta had disappeared. These conflicting details added to the evidence against Rosario and Alfonso. The trial was highly controversial, with even the judge's conduct coming under scrutiny. Many suspected he sought fame, suspicions that were later validated when he authored a book about the case after the trial concluded. Relatives and neighbors of the Botera family watched for years as the foster parents tried to create the best environment for Assunta. They are financially well off, ambitious and have a tough personality, but those close to them notice their devotion to Assunta. Many people still believe that the trial's outcome was a miscarriage of justice. In court, Rosario and Alfonso maintained their innocence. Alfonso remained calm and reasonable, while Rosario often cried, became hysterical. She puzzled in her testimony in justifying his behavior with the effects of the drug. Rosario's cousin testified at the trial and shared some new information. In 2011 and 2012, Rosario's parents both passed away suddenly at home. Their deaths were suspected to be under unusual circumstances. The cousin believed that Rosario was involved in the murders of her parents and daughter to inherit the entire property. However, the defense attorney rejected these claims. Rosario's mother passed away at the age of 77 and her father passed away at the age of 88. Both passed away peacefully from old age in their sleep in their beds. Although doctors found nothing unusual, their bodies, like Assunta's, were cremated, making it impossible to verify any unnatural causes of death. Meanwhile, the prosecutor contended that Rosario and Alfonso were true sociopaths. Alfonso was apparently a pedophile who drugged his daughter and chose to record these incidents. Assunta posed a threat of exposing them, leading to the decision to eliminate her. This theory was supported by numerous photographs and evidence indicating that Alfonso had an unhealthy obsession with young Asian girls. It is likely that Rosario was complicit in these activities or was at least aware of them but chose to protect Alfonso's wrongdoings. Alternatively, Rosario might have seen the girl as a burden and decided to eliminate little girl with the help of Alfonso. On October 30, 2015, the court found Rosario and Alfonso guilty and sentenced each to 18 years in prison. After beginning their sentences, they both appealed, but their appeals were rejected. On November 18, 2020, Rosario was discovered dead in her prison cell with a belt around her neck. This was her third try to end her life. Alfonso remains imprisoned and maintains his innocence.